Science on these motherfuckers.
Hello? Hello?
How's it going, Dr. Greer?
Oh, I'm fine. Good. Yeah, I was trying to follow the step by step, but there were 14 steps not provided. So,
No worries. It's great
right,
to have you. Thanks for joining us here.
great.
How about you? Could you introduce yourself and give a background, kind of, for the audience?
Sure. I didn't know if you wanted to populate the room, but
Sure. Yeah. We can. Why don't we give it another minute? Let's let it fill up. I'll play a little bit more of this tune, and then we'll get started.
all right.
I only drop the hotness. Take it easy. Try to resist the temptation to play around with slow rapping. You'll develop your own legs quickly enough.
Welcome, everyone, to Reverse Engineering Extraterrestrial Technologies with Dr. Stephen Greer. We have a great list of panelists today. The one and only Dr. Stephen Greer. We have Michael, holder of the fire, John Mappin, the Camelot Castle legend, Drew, and Dr. 22, Deja Vu.
And Dr. Greer, I just want to say thank you for coming. It is both a pleasure and an honor for you to come here and speak to our community. I actually just watched your works over the last couple of days. I really, really enjoyed it. And I can thank you enough for coming here today and talking to us.
I'm happy to do it. And you can thank John Mappin for setting it up. Hello, John. Thank you for your help.
Well, hello, Stephen. And I have to say that out of all of the people that my wife Irina and I have gotten to know during the journey that we've had over the last few years at Camelot Castle in terms of trying to get the truth out there to all the various different parts of the freedom movement, you are really, I would go so far as to say you are certainly one of our favorite, if not one of the favorite people that we have met, if not the favorite person that we've met as a result of this journey. We have found your information to be so in alignment with everything that we know to be true. And it really is a great honor for us to be able to introduce you to the BART team. And it's a very, very interesting phenomena. We heard about it, and we're very, very pleased to be part of it. And what can I say? You really are a spectacular human being, and I've been looking forward to this now ever since we spoke and arranged it.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here with you guys. So I don't know if you want me to just sort of, for those who are new to our work, if you would like for me to do an introduction.
Please, yes.
I'm actually now a retired emergency trauma medical doctor. I founded the Global Disclosure Project and Disclosure Movement back in the 1990s, when it was then called Project Starlight, which was a code word name for it when I was shuttling from North Carolina up to Washington to brief folks like the CIA director and others on the problem of UFOs, UAPs, whatever the fake name of the hour is that the intelligence community grinds out and the gullible UFO subculture believes. But nevertheless, by the way, no one in the business calls them either thing. But we'll talk about that. So, that sort of diverted me from the original project, which I founded in 1990, is the CE5 Contact program, which there's an app that you can get called CE5 Contact that goes through the whole protocol for making contact with the non-human extraterrestrial civilizations. It is not geared towards contact with all the other non-human intelligences, and we'll get into that in a moment, the distinction amongst them, which has been confused by the general UFO public. So the initial program, which I started, which began after I had ironically, a near-death experience and then a subsequent direct ET encounter when I was 17 and then 18, was a result of me learning that interstellar civilizations utilize a really advanced form of technology for communication and travel that is transdimensional, which means they traverse from one point in space-time to another through dimensions. And I learned that when I was 17, and I had the near-death experience and had an encounter with a very high level of consciousness, and subsequently, a few months later, directly with ET beings up in the mountains of North Carolina, in exactly 50 years ago, this October, it turns out. So that was in 1973, but that evolved. I just sort of put that on the shelf as I went through my medical career. After I had these encounters, I became a meditation teacher, dating myself now back in the 1973, 4 or 5 era, and went all over the world setting up meditation centers and teaching people higher states of consciousness and that information. And then I went into medical school after my first daughter was born, since I figured I better do something more practical if I'm going to actually support a family like I have now, which I have 4 daughters. So that whole journey led me, after we had a huge mass witness CE5 contact event. CE5 is when you initiate or invite these EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, to interact with you. And it was filmed, not very good quality. It was an old high video camera, just retail grade, but also photograph. And it ended up on the front page of the Pensacola paper in March of 1992, 31 years ago. And that led to the intelligence community, unfortunately, and some maybe fortunately, I don't know, reaching out to me and, well, initially threatening me, because they said, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Well, this is what we're doing, and you have no authority over what we're going to do with this." And we had a bit of a battle with the head of Army Intelligence, General Albert Stubblebine III. But at any rate, that got us on the radar of both what I call the friendlies in the national security establishment here and then later elsewhere, but also some of the people who want to keep all this secret, and more importantly, not so secret as confused. And that's what we want to do today. We want to talk about the deliberate obfuscation and confusion that's been overlaid on the subject for its psychological warfare value and psyop value. But so that's really sort of it in a nutshell. I mean, beginning about 1992, I started meeting with senior officials in military, and then in 93, some of you probably know, actually it was exactly 30 years ago on December 13th this month, that I briefed the director of the CIA for President Clinton, and then subsequently many other high officials and whatnot who were curious about the issue, but had been denied access. In other words, the president and CIA director, senior members of the Congress, I began briefing, all had made inquiries, but had been told, bug off, we're not going to tell you anything. And that's when I learned that there are actually 2 governments. There's the government we elect and appoint, and with a little bit of crossover, there's a shadow or secret government that's rather transnational and global that actually runs everything. The one that we think we're electing is sort of window dressing, and the real action's happening on sub rosa behind the scenes. So that was my coming of age about 30 years ago when I learned that, which was rather disturbing. And since then, we've worked very hard to try to get this issue on the front burner for people around the world, not only the general public, but also governments, so that they could get control over these shadowy and rather illegal programs. But so far, they have not been able to do so. We're working on it, as you can see, from what's going on in Washington, and my organization is providing the bulk of the whistleblowers and intelligence on the issue to them. So that's sort of where we are right now. There's, of course, a lot more to discuss, but I just want to give you a quick 30-year overview.
Sure. And in the meantime, can everyone please make sure to retweet this space? Make sure to retweet it. Let's get the word out. Also, in the bottom right, you'll see a purple little speech box. Go in there, leave a comment, like the space, retweet it. Let's get the word out. Dr. Greer, I watched for the first time. I can't believe I haven't seen it earlier, but I watched for the first time Close Encounters with the Fifth Kind last night, and man, I have so many questions. That was a phenomenal piece of work that you did. Could you maybe tell us about your first ever CE5 experience? Maybe like the first one that you ever had?
Well, the first one was the genesis for the whole concept. And the concept is very simple. If you look at the other categories of close encounters, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, which we can go through, the nomenclature if the audience isn't familiar with it, they're all passive. In other words, a CE1 is when you see an object at close enough range that you can tell what the structure of it is. A CE2 is when the craft lands and leaves a trace or a radar tape or some physical evidence. Close encounters of the third kind, as you all remember from the Steven Spielberg movie by the same title, is when you have an encounter with an actual EBIN, an extraterrestrial biological entity, which is the proper term used for them, or EB. And then a close encounter of the fourth kind is when you have an experience where you actually are on board a craft with these beings, but it was not something that you initiated. It was something that happened spontaneously. Then a close encounter of the fifth kind is when you actually, either usually with a group, but you can do it individually, which was my first experience, make direct contact by inviting them to interact with you, which most people go, "Are you bonkers? Aren't you scared shitless?" Excuse my language. And I go, "No, because they're not hostile, and there's nothing that you need to be worried about except the fake aliens that the humans are putting out there on the street." And that's another discussion we'll have in a moment. But at any rate, so having said that, I didn't know any of this when I was 17, 18. And after I had this spectacular near-death experience when I was 17, about 6 months later, after beginning to learn meditation, I was up on a mountain in North Carolina right before sunset, and I saw a seamless ET craft that was pure silver shining. It just materialized in the sky in the west-southwest, and then it vanished. Interestingly, it looked identical to one I had seen with my twin sister and some friends when I was 8 years old in 1963 back in North Carolina. So when this happened, I said, "Wow, it looks like the same ones. Hi." And they just sort of acknowledged them, and it vanished. So that's all there was to the physical sighting. And then I began to sit and meditate at sunset, had a very deep meditation, which led me into an experience very much like when I died. I had a near-death experience where I had sort of a unity consciousness and cosmic consciousness experience, which was quite astounding because I was raised to believe. My parents were atheists, humanists. They didn't go into a test tube, and it didn't exist. So I didn't know about any of that stuff or believe in it. But nevertheless, there I was. And what I discovered was that the consciousness that we all are awake by is actually an infinite field that we're usually shut off from by our individuality. But there are techniques to transcend individual self into the great being, the great self. And that's what happened to me, although it was rather spontaneously because of the near-death experience. But subsequently, from learning meditation, I learned how to do it just on demand, as it were, or in that state of meditation. And at the end of this meditation, that under the stars at this point, I opened my eyes on the top of this mountain, and it was crystal clear. I mean, we're up over 5,000 feet, and I saw a glow over the edge of the mountain, and it was that craft that I'd seen before, the ET craft, before I'd seen right before sunset, before I began meditating. And then I noticed what I thought in my young man, I just turned 18 mind. I was looking over, and this creature walked over to me, and I thought it was a deer on two legs. In other words, like when they stand up, like a buck when they're fighting. But they had beautiful eyes, kind of deer-shaped eyes. But it turned out it was an ET. It touched me on my right shoulder, and I kind of vanished, dematerialized, best I can tell, and went into a sort of a state or space on board this craft that I was on for, I guess, about 3, maybe 4 hours. I think it's probably closer to 3 hours. And had this incredible experience with these ETs where we basically created the CE5 contact protocols that are in the CE5 contact app. And it was a set of protocols that involved a human going into that field consciousness that's non-local, it's omnipresent, and then searching, looking with your mind's eye, sort of like what the CIA calls remote viewing, to see where the ET craft are. And then you connect to them, and you introduce yourself, and then invite them, if they're able, to come to where you are at any point in space-time here on Earth. And it's a kind of a stream of laser-like coherent thoughts. So we call it coherent thought sequencing. And you show them where you are and see if they are able to appear, arrive, whatever. So that's when the whole CE5 contact protocols were learned and created, but I didn't do anything with it except episodically for a couple of years, and then just sort of dropped it. And then in 1990, I had a ET visit me and said, pick up that which you have dropped, which was a clear reference to doing this. So, as a young doctor, I was in my 30s, I decided, well, if they're asking me to do it, perhaps I should. So I started the entire organization that is behind the Disclosure Project and the CE5 Contact in 1990. But that first event was the sort of seminal event that was astonishing. And the way it ended was even peculiar, because I reappeared on this mountaintop about a quarter of a mile down the ridge from where I disappeared. And I had this strange sort of electrogravitic or anti-gravity field around me. So I could, going down the mountain, I could take a leap. And it was like I was floating for 20, 30 feet and would land. It was like a moonwalker sort of thing. But it wore off, that effect, by the time I got down the mountain into town. But it was quite memorable and enjoyable and beautiful, really. But this was all by myself. I was, all alone up on this mountain doing it, and it was beautiful. And I loved the wilderness, and that's why I was up there in the mountains of North Carolina. I sort of have a deep vibe with it because my grandmother was Cherokee, full Cherokee, of course, and those are the mountains of their ancestors. So at any rate, at this point, I don't know what to do except I start this project. But that was the first, prolonged CE5, and it was quite beautiful and not at all frightening at all. Not at all like what you hear about with these CIA fake abductions that everybody thinks are alien. It's a very, very different kind of experience.
Dr. Greer, it's a very beautiful story, by the way, and it's very interesting how you came into this at a very young age. One of the things that, before I go forward with what I want to say, I just want to say welcome the new speakers to the panel. If anyone has a question, just please raise your hand so we can keep everything organized and everybody can get a chance to ask a question at some point. But I was watching your the two documentaries you put together, and a couple things really caught my attention. Number one of the gentlemen in the documentary said that we lost 100 years at technology, and I think you really touched on the fact that it's a lost century. Number one, and number two, for whatever it is they're protecting, They are keeping these technologies under wraps that can really propel humanity forward and bring us an age of abundance and things of that nature. And then the second thing you touch on that I think is really fascinating, um, you touch on the concept of how we need to raise consciousness beyond religion, because that causes fighting, as you say. And the idea that these beings that we are seeing with these CE5s, I believe, they are tremendously advanced in consciousness so far, but beyond what we could even imagine. And I believe you implicated that these beings are doing this traveling by ESP in the quantum field. If I misrepresented that, I do apologize. But I think it's those two things that I would like you to touch on. Number one, the idea that humanity is being held back for the last 100 years to protect special interests and God knows what else. And secondly, the idea of consciousness, where we need to go. And am I correct in my assumption that these beings are traveling on a conscious level? I know that's a lot at once, but I would love to hear more insight on that.
Yeah, well, let's get some clarity on that. I'm not saying that the ETs are traveling purely in consciousness, although any sentient being can. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this phone call, on this space, have had out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams where they're flying at night, where their so-called body of light or astral body is able to traverse remote places. Now that's different, all related. And this is where I want to get into a little quick overview of the cosmology that needs to be understood in order for any of this to frankly make any sense. And I actually have to do this for members of Congress when I meet with them as well, and senators, because it's very confusing to people initially. And it needs some sort of expiation and clarity. But the real problem is that people conflate all things in the conscious and interdimensional field with extraterrestrial or aliens. And that, of course, it's understandable on one level because any, let's face it, any civilization sufficiently advanced to travel beyond the speed of light through dimensions, any manifestation of their technology is going to look like magic or something supernatural, or as people would say, paranormal. Now, it's not paranormal for them. It's like us turning on a light switch. But remember, if you were to take your iPhone or smartphone and show it to Thomas Jefferson's, whose home is right down the road here from where I'm sitting, Monticello, you would be absolutely burned at the stake as a witch or a demon for having such a device. It would be magic. So that was 200 years ago. So now I think we have to then think about civilizations that are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, how they might appear using the state of the art of their science and technology, and why we may confuse that with beings from, whether they be angelic, demonic, from another dimension, your great-grandmother rattling through the cupboards at night after she died, or poltergeist, all this sort of stuff. And it does become confusing because one of the is sort of a theorem that I've come up with, and that is all extraterrestrial interstellar civilizations are transdimensional, but not all interdimensional beings are extraterrestrials. So in other words, if you are going from point A to B in the cosmos, you have to go beyond the speed of light. For example, and this is one of the very first questions, not the CI director, but his wife asked me, who is the chief operating officer of the National Academy of Sciences in Washington. And she said, well, how are they communicating across these vast distances? And, I was sort of reticent to tell her the truth because you are very much at risk for being considered, nuts if you say what I'm about to say by conventional science people. But I said, look, if you've asked this question, I'm not going to assume you're ready to hear the answer. So that's been my policy for the last 30 years, by the way, in these sort of meetings. I let the person I'm briefing drive it by what they ask. So in this case, I said, well, the speed of light is too slow because if you're from the Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years from here, And our team has had a contact with a very senior ambassador from that galaxy, whom we have called Bijou. But if you are communicating, let's say you're here near Earth and you send a signal back at the speed of what you and I are using right now, that would take 2.5 million years to get there at the speed of light. And that's 186,000 miles per second. Now, for them to reply and say, good, how are you doing today, bud? That's another 2.5 million years. So that just took 5 million Earth years. We know that, therefore, the electromagnetic field of speed and the speed of matter, let's say electrons, subatomic particles, all of that has to be transcended to go from point A to point B, interstellar. And that's why all interstellar civilizations that are extraterrestrial, that are near us or have discovered us, have to have mastered trans-dimensional physics and trans-dimensional sciences. Now, we'll get into that in a moment because it's critically important to, I think, one of the issues I was brought to my attention of why I'm speaking today about various technologies. So if you're, and let's say you have an interstellar spacecraft that's 300, a football field in diameter size, and you're going from one star system to another in this with a group, you're not going to go at the speed of light, and you're not going to go in a straight line. You're going to, basically, the technology bends space-time like you would bend a piece of paper. So if you put 2 points on a piece of paper and then fold the piece of paper so those 2 points are right there, that's basically you're bending space-time through the physics they're using, and you are then traversing not linearly in a line through space, but trans-dimensionally. But what does that actually mean? It means you're traversing through other dimensions. And when you are doing so, your physical spacecraft, the very high voltage systems around them, cause it to drop out of linear space-time. But when it's not in a solid, quote unquote, materialized form, it is actually traversing something very, very close to what the mystics would call the astral dimension, or the worlds of light. And it can stay in that state even when it's hovering over a place on the Earth, so it wouldn't be visible or detected by any radar or even more advanced sensors. So we'll get into all this later, a little bit later, I hope, if we have time. But the key thing is to understand is that when they're in that form, they would, to the untrained eye, let's say, they would be easily confused with the spirit being, a being from a lower dimension, of your great-grandmother, like I said, who may have passed away that you get a glimpse of, all kinds of phenomena, plural. Now, what's happened is that there are many, many phenomena, plural, being called the same thing, alien. Here is the problem. So when you're looking at things like this that are complex, it's important to have this sort of nuance and discernment. Otherwise, people aren't even on the same page talking about the same thing. They're not talking about the same phenomenon. Now, their communication systems are, let's call it internodal. Let's say you have, you're communicating back to your star, your home star planet outside our solar system. And you have to be communicating at multiples of the speed of light. You have a device that interfaces with directed thought. And we call this consciousness-assisted technologies, where your thought interfaces with this technology, and it non-linearly, at the speed of the quanta of thought, communicates that precise information to another node that's, 1,000 light years away. So instead of it taking 1,000 years at the speed of light, it's instant. So that is being done, but there's a scientific interface, and it goes both ways. There are technologies that assist consciousness, so you can be in that state, and these are very advanced technologies. And then there are technologies that receive an interface with the direction of your thought and the instructions your thought give. So it's sort of like instead of a voice-actuated system, it's a thought-actuated system. And those quanta of thought are discrete realities, which we tend to ignore. But at that level of, let's say, AI, artificial intelligence and technology, it's directly interfacing with thought that's clear and specific. not just every random thought. You have to actually connect to it with intentionality and put your attention on it. Some of them also require to touch the console or to touch a part of the craft so that there's a sort of a bioelectric consciousness field that assists. There are different varieties of these, obviously, because there are different civilizations at different stages of evolution. Some are a few thousand years ahead of us, and there's one civilization that we've had an extraordinary experience with that's somewhere on the order of 1 billion years ahead of where we are. So I think it runs the gamut. And if you look at the sky at night, every stable star system out there has planets around it, and there's some types of creatures around each one. So the universe is teeming with life, actually. It's not empty. But that doesn't mean they're all operating the same technology that you and I are. And one of the problems that we run into with the human experience with this is the tragic anthropocentric projection. In other words, we project onto other species. You see people do this with their pets, as if they're human, and as if they're human using early 21st century human technology. But I remind the scientists I work with, there's no reason why a civilization that advanced would be using the speed of light like we are, or using energy and propulsion systems that we are. They're obviously not going to be, because look at the technological advancement just in the last 100 to 150 years, from an agrarian society to what we have today. So it's very important to understand that, but that has implications for what I call the cosmology, because what you don't want to do is conflate and mix together all these different manifestations of conscious entities into one gamish and then be confused about it. It's very easy to do it, because in defense of those who have done so, if you don't know the specifics of the science behind transdimensional physics and how these extraterrestrial civilizations operate, you would be absolutely easily confused by it being looking very similar in some circumstances to something from another dimension, not another star system. So this is why I always say, if you're an interstellar extraterrestrial civilization, you are a priori transdimensional. However, there are beings that are interdimensional, extradimensional, that aren't extraterrestrial, but they're beings and they're intelligences and they're non-human. And those all get lumped together erroneously, and that is the beginning of the end of any clarity. So that's the very first point I wanted to make about this.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's a question of gods, spirits, archons, Elohim, and then actual interdimensional species. So that is a fascinating topic. Drew, you have your hand up. Go ahead, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. And Dr. Greer, thank you so much for all your work. I remember watching Unacknowledged for the first time in 2018, and it was really eye-opening, just to fully understand, all those. And then actually the Pentagon audits for the first time happened right afterwards. So it was interesting having seen your work and then seeing, these Pentagon audits, finally try to go through. Of course, they've all failed. But I have,
and they always will until they get this under control.
Exactly. Yep. So we covered so far. I'm glad you covered earlier the extraterrestrial versus interdimensional aspect. But I want to bring up a few aspects which forgive me if you've already talked about these subjects before, but I'm not aware if you have. So there are some researchers like Robert Zephyr who points to some of this UFO anti-gravitic craft originating from Nazi Germany, and then possibly being reverse engineered over here, or developed by Operation Paperclip. And then
yes, let me go through the history of that, because that's very important that people keep this straight. It's extremely confusing. I can tell you this for people at the Pentagon, the White House, and Congress also. Yes, there were. Now, here we need to go back to what the gentleman said a few moments ago. Our new. By the way, we have 5 documentaries, but the newest one is called The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It. And they've all been crowdfunded. By the way, those of you who contributed, thank you very much, because the nice thing about crowdfunding these is that nobody controls the content but us, and we can say anything we want. We don't have some corporate master saying, take this out, because if that happened, I'd say, excuse my language, fuck you anyway. But that ain't going to happen. So, but when you start looking at these technologies, you really got to go back to the mid to late 1800s. And I don't want to bore people with a lot of science. I don't know how scientific this group is oriented. But when they began to do the early experimentations with electromagnetism, let's break that down. Electrical, right? And then magnetic. Okay, the magnetic field, electromagnetic. The real action's in the magnetic part. Very high voltage electromagnetic systems at certain cycles per second, hertz. Those will have an effect that isn't traditional electricity or an MRI or an X-ray or all the other electromagnetic field sciences we have, or a radio telescope. At a certain very high voltage and certain specific frequencies, are usually pretty high frequencies, cycles per second, you can create a vector, a pointing vector into what's called the quantum vacuum or 0-point energy field, and have all kinds of energy come out that you weren't putting in. It doesn't violate the second law of thermodynamics simply because it's been quantified and was described first in the 30s and then quantified in the 1950s by Dr. Casimir, that this 0-point energy field is exactly what Tesla called it, an infinite energy field. It's not quantifiable, it's so vast. And that's how you get the so-called Tesla, not Elon Musk's fake Tesla, but the actual Nikola Tesla technologies that were kept secret, where he discovered this and actually had an electric car, a real Tesla, running without it being plugged in and charged off a coal-fired power grid. You also had things like the Beefield-Brown effect. So T. Townsend Brown, and then later working with Beefield, found that at certain voltages, and this was in the 1920s, 100 years ago, you could have something levitate. Now, what does it mean, levitate? It's actually the mass canceling effect that happens with the angular momentum, et cetera, changing at an atomic and subatomic level at certain very high voltage discharges. So you get all kinds of weird, unusual phenomena. And this began to be observed between the late 1800s and the early 20th century. And of course, was of great interest because there were all kinds of effects, including quote unquote free energy, where you could have something that would run and create electricity out of this quantum vacuum, 0-point energy field, and it would run your house or car, and you would never have to buy any fuel. Well, that ain't a great thing for people like J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller clan and others back then, because that would mean the end of oil, gas, coal, et cetera, and so on. And eventually, with the electrogravitic, which is the levitation technologies, you wouldn't need roads or railroads or et cetera. So you're talking about hundreds, if not more than $1,000 trillion impact on people who are very powerful. And so began an effort to keep that specific basket collection of technologies very secret by all means necessary. So those secret programs began actually in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Many people think, oh, it began with Roswell or what have you. But no, not at all. So fast forwarding then to the 40s and 30s, there were some electromagnetic weapons that were based on some of Tesla's work dealing with so-called scalar, SCALER technologies. And we had successfully downed a couple of ET craft that were around, and their ET vehicles have been around since there are accounts of them in the Mahabharata and in the Vedas and in ancient texts and cave drawings that go back thousands of years. But what happened is that this early pioneering work of geniuses like Nikola Tesla and Faraday and Maxwell and others, that began to be then potentiated, let's say, or greatly augmented, increased by the study of retrieved extraterrestrial vehicles. And there are accounts of one that went down in northern Germany in the 30s that may have been the source of a lot of the research that was being done at the Pinatubo, and also even people like Werner von Braun and others, and Herman Oberth and others that came over after World War II to the U.S. under Operation Paperclip. But nevertheless, we do know that because of a fascist, and I don't use that term the way it's used today, promiscuously, a fascist known as Paul Mellon, a billionaire of the Mellon family. He, at the end of World War II, went over to Germany. We know this because his grandson, Senator John Warner's son, John Warner IV, has worked with us. Paul Mellon went over with a number of people, including Allen Dulles and George S. Patton, the famous general, and they retrieved a Nazi disc. Now, the disc was different from the bell, so there was a Nazi bell. It was not as advanced as the disc. The disc was not a ramjet. It was an electrogravitic, but it was not fully operational. This was really their big secret weapon that would have knocked all of our aircraft out of the sky. And we brought it back to the United States to study it further, and also to get more extraterrestrial material so that we could advance this beyond that. So we know that in the 40s, there was a crash and downing and retrieval of an ET vehicle in 42, again in 45, and of course everyone's heard of Roswell in 47. But there are a number of those. Those then were put into a very deep black program, although at the time legally overseen by the president and the select members of Congress. However, by 1958 or so, sometime after 1956-7, President Eisenhower completely lost control over that group. It became an out-of-control cabal, and it remains so today. This is why the members of Congress I meet with, including Senate Intelligence and others, they don't have access to those projects because they're behind a hermetically sealed deep black project that we're trying to resolve, that crisis. And they have kept all of this secret. Now, the things that fly at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour and can make right-hand turns without decelerating, that they're really moving in a, let's call it an electromagnetic field bubble that creates a space-time bubble they can move in where there's no G effects. So, I mean, you're obviously, if you were a human pilot moving at that speed and stop suddenly, your brains would come out of your nostrils, I can assure you that. But if you look up what those G forces are, it'd kill you, it'd crush every organ in your body. But these craft, both the man-made ones and the extraterrestrial ones, can control for, say for us, 1G, one gravitational field effect. And so getting that perfected took some time. It took from the 40s until October 1954, whereupon we had mastered gravity control, and we began to make some of the early UFOs that people see and they call them alien spacecraft today, but they're actually made by a company that my uncle worked for his whole life, Northrop Grumman, and the Lockheed Skunk Works, which works with Boeing, hand in glove on those, as well as Raytheon and a few other big, huge defense contractors. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but not much. And so what happened between this lost century is that not only have we lost the technologies that would enable us to travel like that, but we've also lost the ability to have free energy that would end poverty in the world and also end all the pollution. And even if you don't believe there is any such thing as climate change, there are 5 to 6 million people who die every year of particulate matter in the air from coal-fired and gas and oil, from small airway disease and heart disease. And that's the number of people who died in the entire World War II Holocaust in Germany. Are dying each year just from that, never mind the oceans and the species dying. The whole planet's being killed unnecessarily. When I realized this back in 1992 and 3, I said, wow, this has got to get fixed. I had no idea until I briefed the CI director and also the president's team and all of that this was being handled in a way that was being kept secret, but for very evil purposes. One is to control the population totally under a transnational sort of global military approach, which is why they began hoaxing the alien threat in 1953. We'll get back to this in a moment. And then the other problem, of course, is we're killing the planet. And then even similarly terrible is the fact that there's almost half the population of the world does not have indoor plumbing. 3 billion people don't have any way to cook their food. 3 billion out of 8. So we have enormous poverty, which leads to geopolitical instability. We have a dying planet, and we have a decapitated governance where completely the freedoms that we take for granted are fast evaporating because we've allowed that to get out of hand for 70 years or 65 years.
Dr. Greer,
yeah.
Dr. Greer, sorry to interrupt. I just want to get in a quick follow-up question, and then I'll be good for a second. Just to follow up on the Nazi subject, because I know it's a big area of interest for a lot of people in my niche. And so to go back to 1947, I was wondering what your ideas are. It's kind of a multifaceted question. One on Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica with his fleet of aircraft carriers. And what do you think they found there? Do you think there was a Nazi presence there? What do you think is going on in Antarctica today? And then further beyond that question, what do you think about the concept of inner Earth? Like even beyond these, the dumb deep underground military bases. What do you think of the idea of like a Shambhala type idea? And that's basically my follow-up question there.
Well, that's 5 or 6 questions in point of fact. However, taking one at a time, you can remind me when I forget the other 5.
Okay, fair enough.
The Nazi efforts, I don't have. Look, first of all, let me back this up for a minute. I have 755 firsthand whistleblowers and people inside the military intelligence corporate world. I do not drag my junk off the internet, and I do not take second and third hand accounts. So what I'm about to say is no offense to anybody, but I don't traffic in rumors. So one thing I'm very clear on is that unless I have a firsthand credible source that would be in a position to know, I really will just say I don't know. So the extent of what the Nazi regime had, I think, was quite advanced. We do know that they very likely deployed them elsewhere to get them when we were closing in on them. And very likely there were assets that were in South America and we know Antarctica. What became of that, I think, is that it got subsumed. The people, the scientists, the really brilliant folks who worked on those programs got taken in through a number of clandestine operations, but some not so clandestine now, the Operation Paperclip, and became part of an organization dealing with these, some would regard esoteric technologies and capabilities back in the 1940s. And to my knowledge, that continues to this day. We do know that down in the South Pole, for example, there's a massive under the Earth neutrino light array that we have a Raytheon whistleblower who's come forward and discussed. So we know there are assets there that have been developed since then. As for what Admiral Byrd actually encountered, you probably know more about than I do. I have not gotten anyone who had access to any archives firsthand on that. But I will say that whatever people think the technologies are out there that we're capable of in these covert programs, it's worse. It's more. It's way more. It's more than you can imagine. Because remember, you've thrown trillions of dollars, and some of the smartest people I've ever met working in these projects for 80 plus years, and you get all kinds of breakthroughs on many aspects of technology, not just travel, transportation, and energy, but other weapon systems and what have you. Things that cross over into what some would call MK Ultra type electronics, Havana syndrome type systems, and so on and so forth. But the key point here is that those technologies haven't stood still. So whatever might have happened. And I think there were assets that were in Antarctica back in that era. Whatever existed then is so far advanced now that for most people, unfortunately, and it's certainly true of the news media and the UFO community, would be indistinguishable from an alien or extraterrestrial technology. Because, technology doesn't stand still. When you throw that kind of money and brain power at it, you get some serious breakthroughs. It took time to do it, but certainly at this point, it's extremely advanced. So I think that's the key thing. As for a hollow Earth or inner Earth, well, there's certainly ET capabilities that penetrate Earth. Now, remember, like, for example, when I've been up on Mount Shasta, we've had these strange sort of luminous light ships emerge and interact with us that come out from about 2/3 of the way up that volcano. And they're very curious, and my understanding is that they've been there since Lemuria and Mu, or the continents that may have existed millions of years ago in the Pacific. So some of these intelligences and civilizations have been here a very, very long time, way before Homo sapiens, by the way, more than 1 million years, in other words. And so, you get into this question, whose planet is it anyway? But the other point I'd like to make is that the sort of capabilities that are, let's call it transdimensional, means that you can have a solid spacecraft that shifts its angular momentum and its frequency so it goes straight through solid matter. And we've witnessed this. Now, how does that happen? Well, think about the fact that if it's dematerialized, if it's shifted into the near astral, it's not interfacing at all with 3D matter space-time. But even if it is visible and there's sun shining on it, we've seen objects go straight through solid into a mountain, and they are doing that because they're shifted just enough out of the alignment, let's call it, of our matter that it can pass straight through without a single atom touching each other. Now, how is that possible? Just remember that if you were to collapse all the matter without space between the atoms and subatomic particles that your physical body is made of, it would fit on the tip of a needle, a pin. Just that is how much solid mass there is. So when you expand that out into a matrix that includes space in between and energy fields, some of which are just now being described in science, but I think mystics have understood it for a long time, you can understand how you can take something a little bit out of tilt and you could put right through. This is how the ancient masters, by the way, could walk right through a solid wall. That's a city. It's a capability that's done through consciousness and vibration and thought, as opposed to electromagnetic technology. But it's the same principle. So that's another thing to remember. That's why there's no barrier to these objects going straight through the earth, straight through the water, or residing in the earth, or residing underwater. We know of an ET facility off the Marianas Trench, the deepest part of the ocean in the Pacific. And in fact, we have a whistleblower who came forward who was on a Coast Guard cutter when they retrieved an extraterrestrial vehicle that apparently we had downed. And as you all have seen in the disclosure project materials, we have the drawings and all the information about that event from this member of the crew who there retrieved it and actually handled this ET craft. So we do know that they do reside in very deep locations and have been for thousands and perhaps millions of years.
Very, very interesting. Thanks for that answer. I think my follow-up question there would be, so there's a lot of evidence, like you were saying, there's underground UFO bases and accounts of UFOs coming out from under the water. So I was wondering, what kind of evidence directly points to UFOs originating from, outside the Earth, as opposed to I guess the overall concept is, why couldn't these things just be a part of an ancient earthborn civilization that have just been surviving underground for this entire time? And then secondly, final question, with the Apollo missions, if we had, anti-gravitic craft since the 40s, what was the purpose of using rockets to go to the moon? And what do you think of the Apollo missions overall?
Well, in the first part of the question, the follow-up, keep in mind that there have been civilizations here before us, and that they may continue to have had a presence is no mystery. They've been seen for millennia. That doesn't preclude there are others that are of extraterrestrial origin that are newly discovering or have not taken up positions in the planet or on the planet. Those civilizations, my understanding is, when we detonated the first atomic bomb, it caused a disturbance in the trans-dimensional field because the electromagnetic pulse has embedded within it a scalar signal that is a longitudinal electromagnetic wave that goes faster than the speed of light, and it literally rips the fabric of space-time and disrupts interstellar communication and travel because it's crossing into that dimension. Now, we didn't know that until we detonated the first atomic bomb, but that's why there have been so many ET vehicles and civilizations that have been over our nuclear facilities, test sites, storage areas, nuclear weapon ships in the Navy. We have so many accounts of this. It's not a mystery because it's a threat. We're viewed as a threat to these other civilizations. Now, I always turn this around. Of course, it sells a lot of books and movies and crackpots about the alien threat thing. But the truth of the matter is that if they were a threat, we'd be gone. And the other fact is, because their technologies could make this entire planet dematerialize into a pink mist in space in a fraction of a second. Absolutely, that is a fact. So the only reason we're still here is that they are essentially non-hostile. But that does not mean that they are pleased with us, because we're destroying the planet. We have targeted hundreds of their craft and downed them, if not thousands. And we are damaging a biosphere that's evolved for 4 billion years with life on this planet for 700 million. So I think that we're not viewed as a species in a very flattering light right now, but I think they see the promise of humanity, and that's why we're still here. The positive aspects of the human capabilities. But there certainly, I don't want to infer that there were operational in spacecraft in the 40s. As I had said, but I may have gotten missed in the details, we were studying these technologies and didn't have the breakthrough where we could actually master what's called gravity control until 1954. So then to stand up some of these objects to where you could go out into space took a little while. But if you look at our presentations and at the unacknowledged film, you'll see what's called the ARV, the Alien Reproduction Vehicle. And it was seen by Brad Sorensen, who is an aerospace guy, at an air show in 1988. But those were sort of antique craft that had already been around the solar system. They're not interstellar, and they're not transdimensional, but they're electrogravitic, anti-grav, and they had been in the solar system beginning in the late 50s, early 60s. So the components on the inside of the ARVs were actually very similar to that Mercury era instrumentation. And we have a direct firsthand account of someone who actually saw that, was at the briefing where there were a number of military industrial complex people at that air show, classified air show at Norton Air Force Base in 1988. So those craft had been out. Now my uncle worked on the lunar module for Northrop Grumman. It was Grumman at the time that put the first man on the moon. And of course, what folks also, sort of these vast conspiracy theorists, is that 99.9% of the people working on those projects know nothing of this subject. They're working on a conventional space program like the space shuttle, the Apollo mission, and they're not read into which is a military term for briefed. They're not read into these projects at all. My uncle wasn't, and his whole career was at Northrop Grumman. But he had heard things about all this, of course, because people whisper. But they were not tasked with that. They were tasked with putting a man on the moon using conventional jet thrusters and rockets and all that rubbish, that really should have been retired in the mid 1950s. But they wanted to keep that secret because to disclose that, we wanted to get to the moon, but to disclose those technologies would mean the end of the big industrial powers and the end of oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, all of it, the petrodollar. I mean, you're talking about the largest change technologically and financially, macroeconomically, in the known history of humanity. So they've been desperate to keep that secret for that reason, but also because they can control the population if they can control the economy. So I always tell people we do not have a free market economy. We have a controlled economy. And they allow out only what they think would redound to their own control and benefit. These covert, very powerful interests that sprang into, they were around before World War II, but after World War II, people like Paul Mellon, Allen Dulles, and those guys who founded the CIA, this was one of their big tasks, was to keep this sort of perspective. And it was a fascist program, because remember, Paul Mellon was an industrialist here in America, but a very big supporter of Adolf Hitler. And he and many others, like Henry Ford and Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, those were known publicly supportive fascists. And fascism really was when the Gilded Age of industrial interest felt that they should really control government, where the government does the interests of these elite industrial powers, because they used to say, what's good for General Motors is good for America, sort of thing. And those were the original roots of fascism, which Mussolini and then subsequently Adolf Hitler picked up. But of course, the Antifa and now if someone disagrees with you, they just call you a fascist. But it's a very specific name. But that is what happened. So those technologies, when we landed on the moon, we were not alone. I know for a fact that the crater above where we landed was crowded with these UFO objects watching. And of course, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were told to keep their mouths shut and never speak of it under threat of them and their families being assassinated. That I know for a fact. Now, firsthand. So, but the problem is, a lot of people say, well, we never went to the moon, or we went, but we didn't, land, or it's a whole muddled thing. The truth is we went, but what actually happened was never shown to the public.
Very, very interesting. I'm glad you cleared that up, because that's been a big question for me as far as, if we had anti-gravitic craft, why would we, make a big show of rockets some 30 years later? My follow-up question there is, we kind of talked about the
five follow-up questions in a
stuff.
row. 5 follow-up questions in a row. Come on, I got a question.
Keemstar, let's take it to you, man.
Geez, Drew. I mean, come on, bro. It's a whole stage of people. Like, this is your 5th follow-up question. Chill. All right, go to mute.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So anyhow, look, this subject, Stephen Greer, has gotten so big and so popular right now, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I come from a very normie background. I'm not an expert in this community or in this space at all, but there's so many figures throughout the last couple of years that have popped up. You got the new guy that is testifying to Congress. You got Blink 182 guy. You got the Lou Elizondo guy. All these different figures trying to get exposure to happen. And I want to know why there's so much infighting, because every time your name comes up, it seems like somebody in one of these spaces has something negative to say about you. And I remember there was this clip from Joe Rogan many, many years ago, because I know you were on that show, and he was kind of hinting that somebody told him that, not to believe you or not to trust you. What is all this infighting between the main figures in disclosure?
I don't know. I'm not a political or even that social a person, to be honest. We worked the project at the the best we can, and we stick with the truth and direct information. One thing we're very strong on, and this will cause me to sever communication immediately, is that we're trying to prevent World War III. So what does that have to do with your question? The plan that was hatched in the 1950s was to unite the world, as Ronald Reagan said, after he was disinformed and brainwashed, around a common alien threat. All right. That plan began in 1953, and we have a document from the director of the CIA, General Bedell Smith, who said they needed to exploit the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. Dr. Jacques Vallée has a document from 1985 from the CIA, although he won't release it. I think he's been threatened, that clearly describes the CIA engaging with these advanced technologies in the abduction of innocent, quote, peasants in Brazil and Argentina for their, quote, psychological warfare value. Now, what's the value of that? To do this and torture and abduct innocent people using these advanced technologies made by humans and staging all these fake alien events. Because, as Prince Hans Adam von Liechtenstein explained to me in 1994, he said we need to have people hate aliens so that we can unite the world in a global conflagration that would be the end of the world so that Christ would return, quote unquote. Of course, I thought it's just utter madness, but I let the man speak so I could understand what's behind this bizarre eschatological end of the world mindset in the upper reaches of these covert groups. So they feel that the only way to take care of the 8 billion people Malthusian crisis is to manufacture and hoax a threat from outer space, which they have very convincingly done. This is why, of course, you don't make a lot of friends when you point this out, because 90% of the UFO subculture is sort of a bread and circus entertainment situation, scaring the bejeebies out of people with all kinds of terrifying accounts, which are actually either, again, confusions of phenomenon from another dimension and not extraterrestrial, or completely hoaxed man-made phenomenon. So to give you an idea how advanced these technologies are, if you have a man-made craft that can move off the coast of California in a way that doesn't conform to any aerodynamic systems known by the mainstream, you can trick them. And so that after Unacknowledged came out, and after it had about 780 million people see it, they released this footage, which everyone knows now, it's been shown a million times on CNN and everywhere else, of these objects being chased by David Fravor and others and the F-18 Hornet. Those were from the Lockheed Skunk Works. Those were not extraterrestrial. And we know people who worked on them. We have actually a witness who surfaced after I disclosed that, who was offloading, was at a place where that same object, the Tic Tac at least, was being offloaded in the Azores in 1991. So one of the problems is that it's very, very easy, once you have these technologies mastered, to stagecraft, as they call it, or hoax events that look alien for their psychological warfare value. It's a classic so-called false flag, or as the military would call it, deceptive indication and warning. So I have no problem with people putting anything out there that they believe to be true. What I'm trying to do is to provide enough information that we don't get led into, let's say, a Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin situation where we stumbled into the Vietnam War because we hoaxed the attacks on our own ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, or where we got into the disastrous Iraq and Afghanistan wars because we hoaxed the fact that Saddam Hussein had weapons, which he did not have, and which Dick Cheney and his minions fully knew that he did not have. But, $3 trillion later, and God knows how many dead people, here we are. So the big one that they've been wanting to pull, the wool over everyone's eyes, is this alien threat from space. Because how do you unite a divisive world? You create an enemy that's non-human and unite them around a military junta, a militaristic approach, which scares everyone because people, when they're terrified, give up all their liberties. So ironically, some of the people who talk about freedom and liberty the most are the purveyors of the very disinformation that would lead to us losing all of our liberties. So that is why I'm very strong on that, and it's very controversial. But look, I mean, these are facts that we know to be true, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own set of facts. So we have one witness and one military source and one document after another proving that all of these fearsome things have been done by humans using these advanced technologies. You have people going up on Capitol Hill telling members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, until I was asked to come in and clarify it, that no, none of these could be ours. We don't have anything that moves like that. Nonsense. So one of the problems is that if you have people up there who are themselves professional disinformation operatives, like Luis Elizondo, as soon as he surfaced, I was told by a very senior CIA guy, he's been there 45 years, tasked with this specific issue. Very deep black, but I've known him for 30 years.
I agree with you 100%, but you don't even need the intel. Every time Lou speaks, he's trying to scare us.
But my point is, this is nothing new. It's just the latest flavor of the month. Remember, that algorithm, that protocol kicked in the mid-50s. So the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, oh my God, that abduction. Obama's, I think, doing some movie about it. That was us. E.T. Craft don't clamp onto the back of your trunk and leave marks like that. So one of the big problems is we have to sort of rewind and reanalyze all these events that have happened with the understanding there are at least three things going on. Man-made UFO-related phenomenon that looks alien, actual extraterrestrial, both ones that are here and ones that are coming in from other star systems, and extra-dimensional, interdimensional phenomenon. Those three are operating simultaneously and are all being called the same thing. And it isn't helpful because that level of confusion actually plays into the hands of the ones who want to strip the whole world of any semblance of freedom and have everyone goose-stepping underneath the aegis and power of folks who want to scare the hell out of everyone. And you know, as Franklin is attributed to saying, if you're willing to give up your freedom for security, you will have neither. So I think that's one of the very big problems, is that we have to figure out how to go forward with this information, but not in a way that we play directly into the hands of the secret agenda. I wrote a paper in 1999, and it was entitled, anyone can read it, it's on our website, and in our first book, and it's called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy. And I wrote it because what's happening right now, we knew was going to happen. And that is the facts will start to come out, but they will be spun by the spinmeisters who are embedded everywhere into two things. One, we don't know what these are, but they're a threat to our national security. False. And secondly, we don't have any idea how they operate because we couldn't possibly have anything that flies like that. Big lie. Okay. And we did a movie, it's on my YouTube channel, called The Cosmic Hoax, that sort of exposes all this. So it's not that I have problems with, the whole personality things, I don't care. I mentored Tom DeLonge personally. And of course, David Grush, he was unmasked at the time. But his bosses I've been working with, and we were providing information to him and his bosses so that he got to these facilities where he met with people who had handled this material. He's telling the truth about that. However, he was never read into the projects directly. And moreover, never handled the materials directly and never got within a light year of the man-made technologies and the man-made aliens, the so-called program life forms, that these little gray alien and other critters you see. We've been making those. I know how they're made. They were primitive at first and robotic, and they become more advanced in the last 20 years or so. But all of that is something that, unfortunately, it's very confusing, and they've created this whole smoke and mirrors hall of horrors, and it's worked. But my concern is that if we have a disclosure that plays into the hand of the agenda of this secret global government group, we're going to end up in much worse shape than the secrecy has gotten us into. So that's when disclosure serves the secret agenda. And this is why we're trying to be very careful about this. And I know, there's a whole cottage industry that's built up around abductions and mutilations and evil aliens and fear mongering. But the only place that leads is to the result that the secret government, who want to take our freedoms away, have been wanting to do for decades. I mean, it's a sort of ironic, but very tragic. So I think we have to be very, very careful with this, because I will tell you, a little knowledge about this subject is an extremely dangerous thing. It doesn't help the public to put out half-truths, partial truths, and withhold all that other information. So to say that we have these UFOs, but we have no idea how they work when we've already spent trillions of dollars in 80 years studying them, is ridiculous. And that's why Grush is very correct in saying that we have reverse engineered these. Now, what needs to the follow-on to that, which they're trying to keep secret, is that, we have fully operational UFO-looking objects, and they are being used illegally in all manner of chicanery and skullduggery, drug running, human trafficking, torture, abductions, all that stuff. And they're happy for the public to think all of those activities are alien when they're not. So I think this is where the truth is harder to believe than the fiction. And I was told in 1991, when I first emerged on the scene, that if I told the truth, I'd be discredited. And I say that to people the very first time I meet with people at the Senate. I said, look, it's going to be much easier for you to believe the myth and much harder for you to accept the truth. But just remember, we're dealing with technologies that are hundreds of thousands of years more advanced. And you guys up on Capitol Hill in the White House are just looking into this when there's been a covert group studying it with all manner of illegal black budget funds for 80 years. And they have an 80-year, multi-thousand-year, frankly, technological edge on you, advance. And so that's not a good situation. I mean, obviously, and that's why it's necessary to have more and more whistleblowers come forward who directly can speak to the technologies humans have from studying and developing these technologies, so that the public and the policymakers in the not only just U.S. but around the world aren't deceived by those. Because a false flag operation won't work if you disclose the modus operandi, the technologies that would be behind the false flag, right? You're not going to fool anyone. And that's what we need to do. So a truthful disclosure would be about the extraterrestrial vehicles and that history, as well as the technologies that could benefit the Earth, but as well as the hoaxing of events that have been done for their quote unquote psychological warfare value. All of that needs to be part of this. And if you leave the latter out, then everyone's going to think everything that goes bump in the night is an extraterrestrial, that's invading us. And voila, you've just written a $10 trillion check for the military-industrial complex.
Dr. Greer,
Kim.
I would like to introduce, give me a second, Keem. We're going to go to Kim.com, and then we'll take it back to you. I'd like to introduce Kim.com.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Greer. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking time today. I have a quick question, really simple. Elon Musk just 30 minutes ago tweeted that he's confident that the US government has not made contact with non-human beings. And then a second question is, if these non-human beings are around and have, advanced technologies, why don't they have the morality to share this with us and to help humanity to advance and to get out of an age where people are dying of hunger? Why are we not seeing them helping us?
Well, they have. And what happened is that they were betrayed. Look, being part Native American, let me tell you, any agreement like that, you're going to get bent over, and you're going to bend over and rode hard. Go look up the Trail of Tears. So when the ETs did such a thing, and they did, we betrayed them by turning those technologies on them and using them to kill them and to keep it secret. So what you're asking for would require an intervention which they're not quite yet prepared to make, because until we humans get control of our own dysfunction and stand down, and I mean sit down hard, these covert groups that are doing this, the only way they can resolve it would be to take over the operations. They're not going to do that, because that, I hate to sound corny, it's like the prime directive. You don't go to a primitive emerging civilization and just try to impose some order on it. I mean, how well did that work out in Afghanistan, right? 20 years over there. And you're going to go over to a warlord culture and impose Jeffersonian democracy? I don't think so. Look where it is, right back where it is now.
Sounds like humanity
it has
is
to come
more.
from, excuse me, I'm speaking. You really have to have it come from within. Humanity, humans, and human individuals, leadership, have to correct that. Now, what you're asking for certainly could be done, but it would then, of course, be immediately spun by the spinmeisters as an alien invasion, which is what they're trying to avoid. So it's a catch-22 for the ETs. The resolution of it needs to be us, humans, taking some leadership on this and correcting these errors. Now, as for Mr. Musk's comment, he would not be read in. I don't care how rich you are and how many companies you own. There are presidents that aren't read into this, never mind Elon Musk. So everyone is, and I don't, I've never met the man. I think he's done some great things, but he's not in a position to make a comment. He's not informed on the subject. I'd be happy to inform him if someone knows him personally.
Yeah, if I may just respond real quick. So you are saying that the non-human beings shared this with governments, but not with humanity as a whole, because they are worried what this may do.
No, that's not true either. I mean, there are people.
Okay.
Don't forget that Nikola Tesla. I'm looking out my window at where the Swananoa Institute is, up on the Blue Ridge Mountains there, out of my window. And that's Dr. Walter Russell was the guy who started the Universal One and the Swananoa Institute. He mentored Nikola Tesla. They had contact with ETs. Many of the revelations Nikola Tesla and many other brilliant human scientists have had been through contact. But what happened to all his technology? Well, he couldn't get it out. J.P. Morgan told him, if you can't put a meter on it, it's not going to come out. This is why we can have a fake Tesla car, because you can plug it into a meter that's a electrical outlet that's running off the coal-fired, gas-fired power grid. It's ridiculous. But if you were to bring out something like Nikola Tesla knew how to make, and others, thousands of people have come up with technologies that have been confiscated. That's the whole point of The Lost Century, the documentary we just released. There's not just a few. There have been thousands of these sort of inventions that, whether through government action or individual corporations or what have you, have been sequestered and kept secret, and if necessary, the people involved just flat out killed. So I think that there have been these attempts, but again, what are they to do if we humans don't get our act together and make this possible? Because they're not going to actually take over the earth unless we got into such a situation that we were facing an extinction level event. My understanding is that kind of intervention, well, let's just hope we don't get to that point. But until then, they've done everything possible, whether it's been with direct government events where they have encouraged a change. One of the things that was asked in the 40s and 50s, was that the ETs wanted us to not pursue these thermonuclear and other weapons of mass destruction and bring these technologies forward and live together peacefully. Because as Michio Kaku has pointed out, a level 1 civilization is one that is peaceful globally and not destroying its environment. And at that point, you have sort of a ticket to go out in space and become an interplanetary civilization. We're not there yet, and it's their greatest aspiration that we get there, and it's all of our aspirations, I think, unless you're a sociopath. But the fact of the matter is,
well, Dr. Greer, if they are listening to us right now, I got to tell them they need to let the world know what technology exists. They need to let the world know how advanced our lives could be if we had access
you're
to this
so wrong.
technology.
That is our job. They're not going to hack into the internet and send a message out through CNN, and so remember, any action they take can and will be used against them. In other words, well, wait, stop. Don't
It
overtalk
can't
me when
really
I'm
be used
speaking.
against.
Excuse me,
Just a
just
second.
one
You
moment.
interrupted me first. No, you interrupted me first. So let me interrupt you as well. If you are right, and all of humanity would understand that these non-humans intelligences are out there and have this advanced technology, what makes you think that humanity wouldn't rise up against the current leadership and say, "Hey, this is really important for us as humans. We need to get access to this to improve, our state of the
But you
world."
don't. But
What
that's
makes
what we're
you
doing.
think that humans can't do that?
That's what we're doing. What you're asking for is what we're doing. That is what we're doing.
Quick question.
Can I ask a related question? I can't put my hand up,
Ashton,
unfortunately.
go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Dr. Greer. This is Ashton Forbes. Just want to say real quick hi to Keemstar, Kim.com, John, who I think left, and Jake. But Dr. Greer, I think a lot of what you've been saying meshes with the investigation I've been doing into the MH370 videos. I would love if you looked at the thermal video, which I believe shows a non-radiating barrier around potentially a smaller objects, similar to what you were mentioning related to technology. My question for you, though, is what do you think the implications of the technology are? I know you've already mentioned that you think these beings could destroy the planet. Do you think that this might be the reason why it's being hidden from us? To me, it can't be just about greed, although I totally agree with your socioeconomic impact of this technology. Do you think this technology would be that we might destroy ourselves? Because I think that it could be a lot more dangerous than nukes. And thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Oh, one last part too is, do you think Congress knows about this technology as well, or do you think they're in the dark?
Well, I know what Congress knows because I'm up there all the time. But we'll talk about that. I think the bigger issue is that the ETs, their technology is been studied well enough that there's almost parity in covert human programs for these, and that is how they're being used as a weapon. The ETs obviously have no intention to use them that way, and if they had, they would have done it the instant we detonated the first atomic bomb. But I also want to point out they have been working through people trying to bring this information technology out. They just think that humans should lead that and not them, because if they do it, it's going to be looked at as an invasive, forced situation. And force is the inverse of power, as you know. Real power comes from within. External force, something like this, is always disastrous. They're wise enough to know that, to the other gentleman who was on earlier. So that's why they're expecting us to come together and work together on this. But the ETs have no intention of doing that. However, in terms of forcing it, unless we got to a point, as I mentioned, where we're risking the loss of the entire biosphere or most of human civilization. And then there would be a massive, huge extraterrestrial intervention. We know this. Now we don't want to go there. I mean, let's not get to that point, please. But and we may. I mean, as Dr. Bearden said, don't get me wrong, the fools may blow it yet. But the technologies, here's what I've been recommending, is that the level 1 technologies, I just called it something that would sit in your the hood of your car, or sit in a closet in your house and run your house or run your car with free 0 point energy that's rectified into electrical current and wattage. That needs to come out 100 years ago. The things that fly and the things that cross dimensions, which can be a weapon system, those have to be held back and looked at very carefully. Unfortunately, had the disclosure of those other technologies happened 100 years ago, and we'd become a level 1 peaceful civilization, which we're not, and the biosphere was stable, which it isn't, then we could be peacefully using the transdimensional and electrogravitic technologies. But we're 100 years behind the curve. And for that reason, when and I know I'm in speaking with the law enforcement group and the special forces teams that I'm working with, when they're talking about taking control of these covert black sites from the information we've gathered, I say, look, you're going to encounter technologies that are based on studying extraterrestrial systems that are going to be thousands of years ahead of what you have. So this is a huge problem. And that is the real crux of the crisis, which scares the hell out of anyone at the Pentagon or White House or Congress when this comes up, because there's a covert, not ET group, but human group that have technologies that are light years ahead of a B-2 stealth bomber or what have you. And so how do you unwind that without hitting a tripwire or stepping on a landmine and blowing things up? But yes, the technologies, you're 100% right. The first phase of them could absolutely save the biosphere in poverty. But some of these more advanced ones, I really do think the Earth and humanity needs to become more stable before all of those tumble out of the basket. All right. And because, look, I mean, if you're in Mogadishu, you could, with one of these, electrogravitic systems, get a dirty bomb over DC in about 2 seconds. I mean, you're not talking about rocket thrusters and jets. You're talking about electromagnetic field and teleportation systems and all kinds of esoteric stuff in physics. So that kind of technology is in the hands of the very worst people, unfortunately. So I always tell people the situation we're in now is the worst case scenario. The life-saving and earth-saving technologies are withheld, and these trans-dimensional technologies are in the hands of bona fide mass murderers and sociopaths and psychopaths who have this power-hungry desire to control the entire planet. And if they have to get into a brief altercation with ETs or stage one, they'll do it because that's how they can seize power from a terrified public. And I think this is why, at this point, there are multiple things happening. There's what you hear about in the media with Congress. There's what you don't hear about what's going on at National Security Council and White House military office I'm working with. And there's what you're not hearing about from special forces guys that are separating from military and will be involved with a law enforcement action to get this under control if the clown car in DC continues to be a clown car. So we can talk about that. But that, at a certain point where we're sort of in the getting towards the end of a very long algorithm, and how this plays out is going to be very important to the future of humanity and the earth, and it needs to be handled well. And not, we need to be careful not to play into the hands of the folks who have made the architecture around this such that, and the information warfare around it, such that everyone is primed to believe there's a threat from outer space that we need to fight. Now, that is the end of the world as we know it. So I think we have to look at this with people who understand it well and not go down that path. But the technologies, absolutely, are right. You can create an opening in space-time. You can put an energy field around an object and it disappears. You can move. You can actually alter the continuum of space-time. I know a scientist I've worked with out at his farm north of the Redstone Arsenal, where I was in a skiff with him. He could turn dials in electromagnetic fields and have boulders move on his property from where they were 5,000 years ago to where they are now, that kind of thing. I mean, time snaps and weird stuff. And this was human. I mean, the guy was a genius. But I think that those sort of things have other applications, however. As a doctor, I can tell you that some of these technologies applied towards healing and to diseases would be curative. And so there are many, many good applications, but like everything with humans, I always joke as an emergency doctor, you can take a knife and put butter on your bread, or you can take it and slit someone's throat. Unfortunately, I've seen both. And humans have this proclivity to take every advancement in technology and first turn it into a weapon of war. And when you do it on this level, of the basic space-time continuum and technologies that are way more advanced than a hydrogen bomb or a nuclear bomb. Now you're talking about something that's very dangerous if it's in the hands of people who have no ethics or moral compass and are willing to do anything to amass more and more power. And so I think that's where my disappointment has been since the 90s, is seeing that no president has wanted to take this on. And many people in Congress, when they learn what they're dealing with and who they're dealing with on this planet, they get intimidated. So, it's a bit of a process. 30 years into it now, since I first briefed the CI director for Clinton, I look back and I go, well, the big problem here is vision and courage to do it, because when you're dealing with these sorts of folks, they're nasty, and they don't mind killing people, and they don't mind intimidating people. So I think that one of the big issues is how far will, let's say, bureaucrats and politicians in Washington or London or anywhere else take this, and to what extent. This is why I've always said the Disclosure Project movement is a global movement of people, and we hope the people can influence their leaders. But in reality, I've always viewed it, if the people will lead, the leaders will follow. And I've been told by so many staffers of senators and stuff, you need to get more people behind this. You need to get more coverage. You need to get the public behind this, because many of the members of Congress are afraid of, one, being ridiculed, or two, running up against something this powerful without adequate support from their constituents.
What do you believe the correlation between?
Dr. Greer, just real quick, one comment about all of this. So thanks first for answering my question. One thing that I don't understand in everything you've just said, and you are a medical doctor, you have that kind of training. What's wrong with a sign, let's call it a miracle, of providing humanity with advanced technology to cure cancer? Wouldn't that be seen as a very good faith move by these intelligent non-human beings to help us? And wouldn't that build trust towards humanity being accepting of these non-human beings?
But see, your question is based on a fallacy. Your question is based on the idea that perhaps that hasn't happened. But who's going to bring it out? You? You have the clout to go up against this group? Have at it, baby. Let me finish my answer. Okay,
yeah,
so are there people who've had these sort of breakthroughs? Sure. Where are they? They're confiscated. There have been, the American Federation of Science, it's a very mainstream group, said there are 5,000 and some patents that have been confiscated under inappropriate use of the national security provisions. People who don't even make it to the patent office have thugs break in and steal these sort of systems. The idea, the reason they'll let something like a plug-in electric car go forward, that it doesn't change the fundamental dynamics at all. It may be making us go backwards, in fact. So I think that the things that would actually be a game changer are ruthlessly suppressed. And I think people make a very big mistake in thinking that the organization that would want to keep, whether it's something that would disrupt the medical industrial complex or the energy sector or transportation sector, that someone coming forward with that would just be able to waltz out there and do an IPO on Wall Street. Unfortunately, that has been attempted for 100 years, and there are just thousands of people over the years that have had their devices confiscated or have been killed. So let's say the ET craft lands, puts it on a silver platter, hands it to you or Mr. Musk. Who's going to bring it out to the public and survive the...
I would love to answer that question.
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Greer.
have at it.
It is not necessary. It is not necessary to share it with individuals. We live in a world today where the technology exists to share it with the entire world over the internet in an instant. You don't need to prioritize certain individuals or certain governments. You can literally broadcast this to the whole world.
Sure, and that's what they're expecting us to do. But we're the prime residents of the planet. We've created the problem. We're supposed to cure it. Now, why? I think it's educational. I think it's evolutionary. You know, the problem is, I don't know if you have children. I've raised 4 and have 12 grandkids. But if every time your little toddler started to stumble and fall down, you swooped in and picked it up, it would never walk. Humanity is going to have to learn to do these things without it being imposed externally. And what you're suggesting, they certainly could do, but it would be a worst case scenario. First of all, the rather evolutionary and salutary process of humans getting this right ourselves would be disrupted. And number two, I seriously doubt that it would do anything but cause worldwide panic, because the whole problem with this is that everything that the ETs do is turned into an alien invasion week on the History Channel. Let me give you a very good example. This is very simple. Some years ago, we assembled a number of people who had been at nuclear facilities where these objects had been seen. And in several cases, there were malfunctioning thermonuclear weapons that they went in and fixed, because if they had gotten overheated and gone detonated, it could have triggered World War III and the end of life on Earth as we know it. Now, in each of those cases, after we assembled these folks for the Disclosure Project in 2001, there were charlatans that gathered them together and then respun the narrative that the aliens were invading our thermonuclear sites and were a threat to the national security. So same facts, 280-degree opposite narratives. And the organization that would like the narrative to go in the direction of a threat is always going to hijack such an event like you suggested and turn it into Alien Invasion Week. So look, they're way too smart to trip over these tripwires and step on those sort of landmines. And I think that while it's very interesting, I call this kind of a cosmic codependency, where we're expecting some big brother or someone from out in space to fix our problems. I think on the contrary, all things are possible if humans would evolve and come together to fix these problems ourselves. And then you will see these ETs come and assist a great deal. But I don't think they're going to do it. As I said, my understanding is that they're not going to do such an intervention until it's a worst case scenario. And there are no other options open on the algorithm. You're at the end of the algorithm.
What do you think
And that's what I mean with lacking morality, because if you have to wait for the ultimate disaster to strike before you come in and intervene, I think they are lacking morality. I don't like an alien.
Well, you don't. No, we're lacking morality.
And now you are interrupting me, Dr. Greer. That's not polite. You asked me not to interrupt you. Can I have the same?
I thought they were interviewing me. Are they? Who is this that they're interviewing?
You guys are.
So it's okay for you to interrupt everyone, but not for me to cross-examine you a little bit on your ideas.
No, because you're just keep misphrasing the same thing. We're going in circles. They're not
Let's
being
take
immoral.
it to.
Wait. I got a question.
They're waiting. They're waiting for us to get a scintilla of morality. That's it's the other way around.
Okay, I just
well, there are many moral people on this earth, right? They're just not in power. That's the problem, because those who don't have morality, they usually rule.
Yep.
But what I'm suggesting here is maybe make a leap of faith. Show us you're in a good faith gesture that you are good,
and they have,
and share.
And everything you're asking for, they've done.
Individuals share it with the whole world. Let everyone see it. Then it will be hard to cover it up and turn it into some secret operation. If you are right, and these non-human beings are out there, I think they need better advice, because what they are doing now is not helping humanity at all.
Yeah, well, I just
want
know that
to
not to be the case. Yeah,
real quick. I'm curious, Stephen Greer, what do you think the correlation between religion and actual ETs are? And are you personally religious?
I'm spiritual. I mean, organized religion, I think, is fraught, because I don't know of one that hasn't been hijacked by immoral and corrupt men to turn it into some kind of a way of controlling people as opposed to enlightening people. But in terms of, if you strip away that, I think, yes, I have a deep spirituality that was born of my own personal experiences in life. And I think these civilizations out there in space have a similar understanding, probably more advanced. And and that there's no problem with religion per se, except what men do to it. I don't have any problems with the genesis, let's say, of spiritual teachings, but they subsequently fall into the hands of demagogues and people who are just, trying to amass more power over people, which is, the whole big monkey problem with humans. But I think the ETs certainly have a similar understanding of the cosmos. I think they're certainly aware of consciousness in its infinite form, and if you want to call it a supreme or divine being, and all of that. I'm quite sure that that's quite a universal experience and understanding by these civilizations.
If I could be a little bit more precise, so the three main religions and their scriptures, there's a lot of theory now that some of these contact from angels and God were actually ETs. Do you believe that?
Well, they could have been. I mean, what I said started out a couple hours ago saying, if you were to go back 200 years and meet Thomas Jefferson and show him any number of things, it would look supernatural. So I think that in ancient times, people had experiences with ETs, with angelic and spirit beings, with higher consciousness, et cetera, and so on, all of the above. But have you ever saw a movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy? Where someone throws, a Coke bottle out of a little plane, and people in this tribal area in Africa find it, and it becomes this relic of worship, and eventually becomes an object of warfare. And it's sort of a metaphor for what people do. But I think certainly people, if you take Ezekiel's wheel, there could be a number of references that could have in fact been an experience with very advanced interstellar transdimensional civilizations. At the same time, there may have been experiences with beings from a higher spiritual realm. And if you didn't understand, it would absolutely look like it had to be metaphysical or paranormal. And even to this day, the whole UFO subject often gets thrown into the wastebasket of, quote, paranormal or metaphysical for that reason. And I think that what we have to do is bring some updated cosmology and scientific understanding to all this, whether it's the science of consciousness and non-locality, but also of how technology from another star system would appear and manifest could very well be something that would look like magic or something paranormal. And so if you go back thousands of years, I mean, at that time, the Earth was flat. The sun went around the Earth, not the other way around. Galileo was excommunicated by the church for suggesting it the other way around. It was just recently recommunicated and forgiven. But you get into all these sort of problems and with not enough knowledge. So knowledge leads to enlightenment, but you first have to seek the knowledge and the truth. Often what happens is people jump to conclusions and their minds are made up, and that's it. And so what George Santayana said very brilliantly, fanaticism consists of redoubling your effort when you've forgotten your goal. And so that pretty much sums up most political, social, and religious movements. But so you have to avoid the fanaticism and start looking at what was your initial purpose anyway, whether it's a spiritual or religious organization or a political or social movement. And I think in the case of spirituality and these sort of phenomenon, there have been many, many people who've had experiences with ETs and confused it with something from another dimension, or something from another dimension and thought it was ET. And that is actually understandable until there's enough information that people have, but also experience people have through their own spiritual development to be able to discern the one from the other from the other. One good way, by the way, for those of you curious, to tell an ET vehicle from a man-made one, the extraterrestrial vehicles have no seams. They are not manufactured out of parts. They are extruded transdimensionally as a whole. That's why they're integrated seamlessly, all components. Whereas the man-made ones, there are rivets, there are parts, there are things that come out, this sort of thing. They're very, very different in their basic manufacture from the actual ET ones. And this is the other thing we're going to be doing those of you who really have a deep interest in this, hopefully in the next month or two, we're going to launch what we call the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. It's an enormous amount of data and information. It'll be basically the Wikipedia on this whole subject, involving hundreds of top secret witness testimonies, thousands of government documents, 122 cases of these objects being downed, crashed, and retrieved and studied, on and on and on. And that we hope we can get out to the public, next year early in 2024. And we're trying to finish it up right now over the holidays. The early versions of it that have not been beta tested have been provided to the Senate Intelligence Committee and Armed Services and the Pentagon Aero Office and the White House. But the version we're working on now will be in a database. It's very searchable, and it's going to a work in progress. Obviously, something this huge. I mean, it's the raw data we were putting in was, I don't know what, 20 terabytes or something like that.
Dr. Greer.
But that'll be available, we hope, to everyone soon, and people can learn more about this.
Dr. Greer, it's John here, and John Mapp, and I just want to say that I've had some awareness of this project that you're working on, the database project, and I think to provide that as a resource to this planet is going to be one of the most fantastic achievements of your project so far. And because I've had the opportunity to be briefed on it, how will people be able to access that particular part of the work? Because I know a couple of friends of mine have been very, very excited about that. And, when you briefed me on it, I was like, this is just awesome.
Oh, it's gonna be shocking. There'll be nothing like it ever that anyone will ever have. We hope to keep it open source, meaning it'll be backed up blockchain, et cetera, but it'll be available to the public. But right now, we've already lost about $450,000 doing this, or spent. And we don't know what it's going to cost to get this out to the public, and then what the hosting costs are going to be. We're hoping to do some crowdfunding to support it, sort of like Wikipedia does, through people making contributions. If that doesn't work, we may have to put a mandatory paywall up, but I don't want to do that. I want to make it so all 8 billion people on Earth could have access to it. We're still trying to do a feasibility study on that, because this is not my wheelhouse as a doctor. We have data people looking at it.
Well, please send us the details of how we can help.
Well, we will. Actually, after the new year, we're going to announce a crowdfunding project, and then very shortly thereafter, the sort of first beta tested version of it, we're going to put a huge announcement. So if you go to my website, drstephengreer.com, you can sign up. It's a free email newsletter, and we'll just send you a notification. But I guess, John, you could send something out to people through this too. But we'll send out a notice, and we have a few million people who follow us in social media and YouTube, and we'll announce it, and then we hope it just goes viral, because people will be able to jump on there. And what we don't know, we're going to have to have it hosted well enough that the whole system doesn't crash due to volume, because the bandwidth used is going to be enormous. I don't know if you can even envision this. I have 100 and some hours of top secret military and intelligence witness testimony, the raw footage of which will be in there. All 750 whistleblowers' information, but not their personal names if they don't want them out, but what they knew or a synopsis of it, all will be in there. All 145 illegal black sites around the world that have underground and above surface facilities, including the project code numbers, the building names and numbers, will be in there. We're not going to hold any of this back. So it's going to be, of course, risky, but we're just going to go ahead and do it because we know time is getting short for getting this issue resolved.
Dr. Greer, the BART community would love to help crowdfund and sponsor that project. I think it would be perfect. Our community loves your work and loves the truth that you're putting out. So we would love to help sponsor that and be a part of that and really help get the word out, especially on the blockchain front. I think that could be a perfect way for the BART community to help make that happen to the best of our ability.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, just for the sake of order, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. Do not interrupt anyone. It's very disrespectful and rude. So just with those certain ground rules, we have a couple people with their hand up right now. And Dr. Greer, Dr. 22 has a question for you. In 1984, I see you. I know you had your hand up for a minute. We're going to get to you. And Jordan, I believe. Hold on. Jordan, we will get to you as well, but please, if you have a question, raise your hand and do not interrupt anyone. Let's keep it cordial and let's keep it clean.
All right.
Dr. 22.
Hi, Dr.
Yeah,
Greer.
yeah.
So, as I'm sure you know, in December 2020, the former head of Israeli Defense Ministry Space Directorate, Haim Eshed, became vocal about the Galactic Federation, and he claims that extraterrestrials have been communicating exclusively with the American and Israeli government, and that the USA is sharing bases with ETs underground on Mars. I'd love to hear your opinion in how accurate his claims are.
Yeah, I don't know him. I do the one data point. First of all, I seriously doubt that there's only two countries are involved with, and secondly, I don't know that there's an ongoing cooperative situation. There's one that existed some years ago. But on Mars, I do know the head of Army Intelligence, General Stubblebine, did tell me that, of course, these short range, meaning not interstellar, but within our solar system craft, we had been to Mars, and that there was underneath, he specifically said, underneath the surface of Mars, an extensive ET base. And I've heard similar information from other folks who've imaged in classified, sequestered systems at NASA, the Goddard Space Flight Center, some scientists I knew there, and a couple other sources. So I think that part of it is substantially correct. As for this sort of only Israel and America communicating and that I doubt. May sound patriotic to him, but I think it's completely not true. And then lastly, the civilization that people say an intergalactic group or galactic group. It's not galactic; it's intergalactic. It's interstellar because the Milky Way galaxy is extremely small. It has 100 billion star systems. The twin galaxy next to us is shaped about the same, a spiral, is Andromeda. That's a similar 100 billion star systems or so. And that's another galaxy. And my group has had an interaction, also a photograph of an ET ambassador from that galaxy. So we do know that the project, let's call it the mission to planet Earth, is in fact intergalactic, not just galactic. And the best we can tell, none of the civilizations are hostile per se, but quite a few of them are quite upset with the direction we've taken. Keep in mind, we haven't talked about this. We have a very, very advanced weapon systems on satellites in space, but also ground-based, as well as on aircraft and on ships on the ocean, that use scalar and electromagnetic pulses hooked to what are called neutrino light detectors to pick up where the ET craft are, and we strike them. So now I speak of this with direct knowledge. I was just recently flown in a classified helicopter over two black sites out west. I can't say where they are. We have a cooperating whistleblower who is very senior at those places. And just one of the sites I was over, which was a Lockheed Skunk Works facility, have these illegal electromagnetic pulse weapons, and on average knock down about 2 extraterrestrial vehicles per year, just at one site. So there's a very big crisis going on that neither the White House nor the Congress is dealing with yet, because they're still asking the basic questions of what is a UAP and where are they from and how do they work, and the basic entry-level questions. Unfortunately, the covert, deep black, let's call it the illegal secret government programs, those are light years ahead. And we do know that's ongoing. So in this coalition, let's call it, there are civilizations of various degrees of development. None of them are hostile, but they are increasingly not happy about our hostility and what we're doing. And keep in mind, there's a certain danger of that because technology doesn't stand still. So as we have studied and applied and figured out more of the physics of how these extraterrestrial craft and communication and teleportation systems work, we turned those into weapons. And those weapons have, in fact, been turned right back on the ETs. And I think there's only so much of that patience that's going to last. I mean, at a certain point, we're very at risk for crossing a red line out in space, and that will not be good. And one of the reasons I know this is a problem is because I've had people in the system who worked that, like this particular operator at these two black sites. And I have video footage. It was really cool. We were in the middle of the day. We thought we were going to get blown out of the sky. There was a security vehicle right by one of the EMP weapons. He went, oh shit, and he started switching on all his sensors to be sure we didn't get tracked and hit. But a lot of what I do is risky business, you can imagine. But what was interesting about that, I was able to film the underground opening at that particular site where the craft, the man-made UFOs come in and out. It is quite interesting to see the architecture of that way out in the desert. But so one of the problems is that this man, talk about morality and ethics, he was just in tears. I mean, this is a special forces guy, now very senior executive, very upset with what we're doing, knows it's wrong, knows how dangerous it is, and is cooperating because he wants us to be able to put things in place to stand down those systems. And keep in mind, it's not just extraterrestrial vehicles we're knocking down. If there's a civilian aircraft that crosses that TFR, that temporary flight restricted area over this site, or is just on the edge of it, and the EMP cone, the sort of zone of that EMP and scalar weapon is too wide, they knock down private aircraft. And he has actually retrieved those, including the bodies, and they are incinerated so there's no trace of them left. And they just put a missing persons report out through an intermediary. So he's very upset about both the loss of ET and human life at these facilities that he has a senior position in. So we do have some people of conscience and morality coming forward. But this would also explain why a lot of people say, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? Well, before they would fully materialize and get there, they'd be blown out of space and blown out of the sky as soon as they cross the speed of light barrier and become 3D. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, unfortunately. And so those systems, top priority is to stand down those systems. Now, I know, gosh, 20 years ago, I met with the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes. It might have been the late 1990s. It was the end of the Clinton administration. And the Defense Intelligence Agency is like CIA, but from the Pentagon. It's the top intelligence, military intelligence for the whole U.S. Department of Defense. And the 3-star general I briefed wasn't read in, but he had heard things that some operations that we were doing covertly related to UFOs were very dangerous, but he didn't know what they were. And when I told him this, he was extremely upset because he had not been read in or briefed on it. But he knew how dangerous that kind of stupidity is. So one of the proofs that these civilizations aren't hostile, those people I've worked with from Area 51, from Edwards Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base, Wright-Patterson, Dugway Proving Grounds, all the really top, Pine Gap facility in Australia, all those men have told me, my God, I mean, the things we're doing, if these guys were hostile, we'd be smoked, we'd be gone. And now, of course, it doesn't make for a good science fiction movie like, Star Wars or Independence Day and all the tabloid rubbish. But the fact of the matter is, they're given their technological capabilities and given our foolishness, that's all the proof you need to know that they are not hostile. But I think that we're in a situation now where the technology curve has gone so far up in terms of our capabilities covertly that I'm not sure how long that largesse will continue. And so I'm
Dr. Greer,
overtly telling people that we need to make a change fairly quickly and do a U-turn off the path we're on.
Dr. Greer, before I get to 1984, who's had his hand up for a minute, so I really don't want to elaborate on this too long, because I want to give the other speakers a chance to ask their question. But I think what you just said there is incredibly important. And, throughout this whole conversation, you have been saying that, no, they can't just land on the lawn. Kim is saying, why don't they do some type of widespread exposure? And I could see how that maybe would cause mass pandemonium. So I don't think that is realistic either. Now, on the flip side of the coin, as you have said, the government is now at a level where I've seen some things in your documentary where they can now, quote unquote, take ET home. So it would be very, very easy for them to fake some type of UFO attack. And I do think timing is of the essence. So, and without getting too long-winded, because I definitely want to give 1984 a chance to ask this question, and then we have Jordan. I mean, at this juncture, I believe that we could potentially be a year or maybe even 2 years away from some type of false flag attack. I do not believe we have any type of luxury of time at this point. Secondly, as you have mentioned, these people are absolutely ruthless. So nobody is going to take them on one-on-one. So what I usually do say on my Twitter account, the only way that we win as a collective is with non-compliance. And what I mean by that, you cannot give in to the objectives of their psyops. And that is the only way I see us being able to overcome what I feel is very, very close to coming to fruition.
Well, yes.
So,
And I
you
agree
have
with you. The time is extremely short, and we all know that. Those people who worked in the system, and which is why people are defecting from inside. They see we're in trouble. And I even had the former chairman of a Fortune 100 company, contractor, dealing with this issue approach us. Of course, he immediately had his whole family threatened with being killed. But I think that is why it has to happen pretty quickly, because the false flag operation already started in the 1950s with man-made craft, the faked alien abductions and mutilations and all that. And any of the scientists involved have known for years that those events are not extraterrestrial in origin. They're human stagecraft and staging. Of course, I mean, it doesn't do much for the cottage industry of abductions and mutilations and ufology to say so, but because it's not as sexy as aliens, raping everybody. But because people love to be afraid, and people love horror movies, and people love negativity, and people love war. But this is at a point where war at the level of these technologies is so much more Earth civilization ending than a thermonuclear one, which would, of course, be enough to end civilization as we know it. But the ETs, I think they actually will, at some point, have to come forward if we keep dropping the ball. What I keep saying is we're the denizens of Earth, we're the children of Earth. We need to take the lead, and they will then assist. And they have. But it's not going to be this sort of let's sit back on our laurels and then they hijack the internet or they hijack something and force it. If it gets to that, and it could come to that. That's the worst case scenario, not the best. That outcome is what we want to avoid by coming together. I agree with you in a collective of telling the truth and bringing the technologies forward, bringing the information forward, encouraging our leaders to take responsibility for this, making a call for more whistleblowers to come forward who have direct information, and I'm glad Mr. Grush came forward, but he's secondhand. We need to have what I'm handing over next week to the House Oversight Committee, or a list of people to be subpoenaed that are directly firsthand, who handled the craft, who handled the bodies, who've been on missions where we've downed these objects. Those are the Disclosure Project people, not the secondhand. Everything so far have been secondhand folks, right? Or a pilot chasing one at some distance. So what we need are these deeper whistleblowers and folks come forward. But the more you're intimately, directly involved with the project, as opposed to a passing sighting, such as our jet pilots have had there with the Tic Tac, the more you know how dangerous it is to come forward. So I think that that's why one of the things we asked for that we didn't get was a witness protection program for the very high value witnesses we have. But there are some, I just have one that just surfaced from Edwards and also Nellis, Area 51, who's a retired Air Force officer who is willing to come forward and is willing to testify openly for the Congress. So we are finding some people willing to do that now. There are others that we would subpoena because they want to be forced to. Basically, they want to be forced to, otherwise to be in contempt of Congress because they're still terrified of their non-disclosure agreement. So one man I'm working with had an 80-year non-disclosure agreement he signed, and he signed it when he was in his 50s. So, obviously it was signed, made so that he couldn't speak until he was no longer on the planet, right? So, but he's reached out, but he's going to have to be compelled. So it's complicated, and that's what we're trying to negotiate and get through the Congress. The next best approach would be law enforcement just decides to go in and stand down these operations.
Yeah, and I think it really just comes down to safety and numbers. These people, like you said, were up against extremely ruthless people. And if you don't have the safety in numbers and safety in awareness, it's going to be an uphill battle. 1984, I apologize for making you wait so long. What's up, my friend?
No worries. Thank you, my fellow reptilians. And Dr. Greer, I'm a huge fan of your work. My question to you is, have you ever come across any evidence of extraterrestrial panspermia or any changes that have been made to the human DNA or the human genome as a direct result of extraterrestrial interference?
Or augmentation. I don't have anyone who's been able to prove that. My own personal view of it is that there's a big evolutionary gap from a Darwinian point of view that is not explained, and very well may be the result of there having been ET involvement with the advancement of human intelligence and human consciousness back some time ago. And in fact, there could have been more than one intervention. My own understanding of it is that the Earth and other planets that are emerging become a project of development for intelligent life in whatever sector of the cosmos they're in. And also keep in mind that there have been civilizations on the Earth for which we have very little history. I have a man that I work with he works under contract with IT&T, but he's actually CIA. And occasionally he's a physicist, and he's occasionally given an artifact that's hundreds of thousands or a million years old. That's a technological object long before there was known human. And some of them, he says, appear to be of extraterrestrial origin, but a lot of them are of human origin, but from a civilization or civilizations that existed pre-recorded, sort of antediluvian, for which we have no historic record. So I think that the Earth holds many mysteries. There's been life in one form or another for 700 million years here. Homo sapiens are relatively newcomers. And so it's very likely there have been evolutionary steps taken and involvement by extraterrestrial civilizations throughout the evolution of Earth. I mean, some people have felt that the Earth may in fact have been somewhat terraformed, to use a sort of Trekkie term, but where, there are a group of computer scientists got together some years ago, probably about 10 years ago, and calculated at normal evolutionary rate of mutations in Darwinian theory that the genome on the planet, the genetic biodiversity on the planet, would take about 4.5 billion years to evolve under those models, but there's only been life for 700 million, and any advanced life for much, much less. And so how did that happen? And there are some species on the planet that don't seem to have a very solid Earth-based evolutionary source. So there are some anomalies. And now, is that proof? I don't know. I mean, ancient archaeological items like that are not my particular specialty, but I have run across that. So I think your question is spot on, that there's been some kind of involvement that goes back long before known human, and certainly, antediluvian, pre-biblical, pre any recorded history we have. Because I also heard from, I guess everyone's heard of the Sphinx in Egypt, in the, not the Great Pyramid, but the Sphinx itself is older and appeared to be there before the quote unquote flood, some kind of geophysical event that happened. It did happen. And that underneath the Sphinx, there was a project many years ago where they were going to put fiber optics in the chamber under there to see what was present. And Mrs. Boutros Ghali, the Secretary General of the UN that I briefed initially back in the 90s with Boutros Ghali, who is Egyptian. He was Coptic Christian, and his wife Leah was Jewish, ironically. So they would host us in New York for meetings. And she told me that they were very instrumental in helping to organize this expedition. And they did find objects underneath the Sphinx, but that the head of the antiquities in Egypt was actually had a side gig undercover with CIA. All the material that was there was confiscated and disappeared. I suspect some of it may have ended up in the lab of this scientist that I've met with and been in his facility. I've been in a SCIF, a secure compartment information facility. He has one off base and one underneath his house, actually, out in southern Tennessee. But what's fascinating is that you think about that, you think, wow, what kind of civilizations, when people talk about Atlantis and Lemurian Mu and all that, but where there's been artifacts found. So I think that there has been a very long arc of life on this planet that's evolved, and I think there have been extraterrestrial involvement for a very, very long time. Now, the current phase of Homo sapiens, the way I see it is that we're sort of at the end of this 450,000 year, in the ancient Vedas in India, they call it Yuga, big cycle that's closing, and we're opening up a 500,000 year universal cycle. And right now, those of us on this planet are kind of crossing the cross currents and the chaos of one ancient era closing and another era of, I think, universal enlightenment and travel and peace is opening. But we're caught in that little 100-year snapshot, as it were, out of a million years. But that, I think, when all that transition takes place, there'll be a lot of information that'll start coming out about what you're asking about the ancient connections Earth and humans have had interconnected through the cosmos.
Dr. Greer, what's interesting, when you brought up the Sphinx, I was thinking about how somewhere in Egypt, I don't know exactly where, but there is a flower of life that is laser inscribed into the building, and it is absolutely impossible for humans to duplicate the technology even today. So it makes you think when you realize these things.
Yep.
Jordan, welcome.
Hey there, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Quick comment regarding Kim.com's statement, wondering why benevolent ETs don't jump in and save humanity. I think you have to look at this planet as a school, with us being spiritual children in a learning process, so it's likely they don't openly meddle in our affairs because we need to figure this stuff out on our own. There's a free will and karmic component to keep in mind with that conversation. Yep. Also, regarding Hamish and from Israel Space Program, he didn't actually claim those things about the Galactic Federation. The media completely misrepresented statements he made in a book. The author of the book interviewing Hamish posts on Facebook, and she was saying he was quite mad about how the media twisted his words. Anyway, as for my question for you, Mr. Greer, thank you for your work. Regarding the idea that supposedly there are no hostile aliens, because if there were, they would have openly destroyed our planet. Isn't that assumption fairly logically inconsistent? Wouldn't it make more sense if there were malevolent extraterrestrials out there for them to stay behind the scenes and work sort of with the human powers that be on this planet to enslave us, pillage our energy, and pillage our resources instead. I don't understand why polarity suddenly stops where our atmosphere does.
Well, because if you have that sort of malevolence in your paradigm and you also have those technologies, it's you're not allowed out of your solar system. Now, there are extra dimensional beings that are doing that, but they're not evens. So it gets back to the very first of the introduction to this call, and that is the extraterrestrial biological entities that are from physical planets and star systems. If they had that intent, they would have never survived crossing out of their own solar system. Now, are there rather mischievous entities? Now, I had this great conversation. Everybody's going to get a laugh out of this. A little bit of humor is fun. So I was at the Vatican, and I was meeting with a man named Monsignor Balducci, and he was senior theologian to the Pope. Back then it was Pope John Paul in the 90s. And I was at his apartments overlooking St. Peter's, and I interviewed him. We have a wonderful interview with him and also the Vatican astronomer and a bunch of people about this, where they confirmed that, of course, we're not alone and they know it. And this issue, this subject, what you just brought up, came up very quickly. And it was interesting because Monsignor Balducci was a demonologist, of all things, and a theologian. And he said, oh, yeah, neither angels nor demons need flying saucers. So we started talking about this whole, I call it cosmological indigestion, where various phenomena get mixed together, quite understandably, in the early days of investigating this. But that if there was a civilization that was from a 3D planet and star system with that intent, that had a technological capability, there would be no need to do all of that sub rosa behavior, because they could simply shut everything down and take it over or eliminate the system. Now, are there sort of negative entities that would have that inclination? Sure. One of the senior members of this cabal of folks keeping this secret that I know is a Satan worshiper, and his wife is a devil worshiper, and he's been a colonel in the army, and they're whacked out, and they're really into that dark energy and dark side of things, and they have technologies that can create a vector into those creepy dimensions and pull things into this dimension, etc. One of the things we haven't talked about are the technological capabilities that cross dimensions. And I know this happened at Montauk. It happened at a few other places. Some of this information we put out years ago became the foundation for a series I've never looked at, but I've seen clips of it, called Stranger Things. I think it was on Netflix or something. And but those technologies, it's like the Skinwalker Ranch out in Utah. We've been out there. Those technologies that are human can create a vector into these other dimensions and bring all manner of troublesome things into this dimension. Now, those are extra-dimensional and interdimensional technologies and beings, not extraterrestrial. But they kind of get all mixed together because there's a lack of a good operating paradigm and cosmology. So yes, absolutely, that exists. But the other, I wrote sort of an analysis of this back in the early 90s called sort of the cosmological barriers to hostile civilizations banging around the universe. Because, for one thing, this so-called interstellar coalition wouldn't allow it. And secondly, if they were of that mindset, they would be where we are now. And that is where we're at each other's throats in a malevolent way, facing thermonuclear war and endless wars, like humans are now. And so such a civilization usually implodes and kills itself before it can escape its solar system. But these other things, let's call it stranger things, that's different. And but it's yes, but is what I would say to your comment. But again, everyone wants to believe in the cowboys and Indians of good and bad aliens, because that's basically our biogenetic programming. We grew up, we're 98% identical to chimpanzees. They organize into troops and have wars, murder each other, etc. But I think that we have to be careful about this sort of anthropocentric projection, where we project our own state of awareness on more advanced interstellar civilizations. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that there are humans that are rather psychotic or at least sociopathic, who have enormous power. They're high functioning psychopaths and sociopaths that control a lot of these operations, that do pursue that level of the cosmos and on a negative end of it, and get a great thrill out of it. But as I understand all this and have seen, and having worked with scientists who have created toroidal devices where they can tap into some, like the ninth ring of hell, and bring some bogamy creature right into 3D, running around a laboratory. This is not a myth. This is not some science fiction. So, that's very different, though, than an interstellar vehicle with EBINs on it that are extraterrestrial from another star system. However, because of the fact that interstellar civilization has to become transdimensional to go from point A to B, and even if they're hovering in the atmosphere or outside your window, they could be shifted into these other dimensions. It's really easy to confuse the two. That's the only caveat. It's the main caveat I'm trying to provide. And that level of detail and knowledge and discernments, we're going to all have to, become comfortable with going forward, because the universe is a very complex multiverse.
You know what I was thinking while you were talking about all this? The interdynamics, and it's too long of a conversation I'm likely to get into right now, but the interdynamics between let's just say the watchers and then these interdimensional species, and what is the hierarchy there. And I think Jordan mentioned something good in regards to why they can't just land on the lawn, is because it's a school, right? We're here to learn, we're here to evolve. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about evolution. And I think certain people want to push things one way and other people want to push things another way. And then there's also agendas in place which block all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, this whole game is about evolution, in my opinion. And there's higher beings and different species, whether they're interdimensional or intergalactic, that are interfering in this process for whatever reason. Dr. 22, what's up, my friend?
Hey, so Dr. Greer, I'm trying to figure out the words how to ask this as respectfully as possible. For everybody who's not aware, General Stubblebine, I can't remember his name, sorry, offered you $2 billion to join his team.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you attribute your longevity to, as to, why they just haven't taken drastic measures against you.
Well, again, the question is based on a fallacy. They had taken drastic measures against us. As many of you know, 3 people on my team were killed between 1995 and 1998. I was almost killed. And someone had come to me and offered executive protection, TWEEP, terminate with extreme prejudice, against these sort of folks. Starting in 91, I said, no, I didn't want to get involved with that. I'm more of a meditation teacher and doctor, healer, and other things. And I didn't want to go there. And after this happened, I said yes. But back in 92, when General Stubblebine offered me that amount, of course, he then went by my back to my wife, who it's her 75th birthday yesterday, by the way. And we're going to have to go soon because we're going out to dinner tonight. But I think that what happened is, they were very unhappy with what we were doing. They were most unhappy with the CE5 contact. What most people laugh at and dismiss was their biggest concern. And the reason for that, and this is where you really do a collective, whoever mentioned that earlier was spot on, mass consciousness coming together to make contact with these civilizations, that's what they're waiting for. They're not waiting to break into the internet. They're not waiting for the president at this point. They're really waiting for us. And so the question is, what is the response of humans going to be? So the whole Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind documentary, and the hundreds of millions of people have seen it, And luckily, with the app has been in the top 10 apps for educational apps for 3 years now. And all kinds of interesting people are out there. Who's the guy, the Captain Kirk of the Enterprise? William Shatner loves doing it, and Demi Lovato, and Aaron Rodgers. All kinds of people are doing this. And the reason we're trying to create a mass movement to do it is that it's showing a side and a face of humanity willing to enter into dialogue and peaceful contact rather than just a covert military operation targeting them. And that is one of the main signals that these ETs are looking for, engaging to the extent of how far to come forward. In a perfect situation, I'm hoping, this is my vision. I had a beautiful lucid dream when I was back in my early 20s and I was in the future. I was probably the age I am now. And I was at what looked like white sands. It certainly was a desert area and very, very bright white sand. And the entire U.S. government military had transformed on this issue, and they were hosting an open contact event. And I was there leading the CE5 ambassador team. And this object comes out of a blue sky, and not that large of an object. It was probably 20 feet across. And a senior extraterrestrial elder comes out, and the whole thing is being filmed, and the whole thing is seen by the whole world. And it's a peaceful, open contact event. That is where I hope we can go, rather than rumors and rumors of rumors. But I think the conditions have to be set to allow that. Remember, we've been targeting and downing these objects for decades. We have technologies that are reaching almost parity with what they have. The U.S. government, legal government, is still, frankly, couldn't even find the washroom in an underground base where this stuff's going on. And the public has been totally misinformed. And the mainstream media are shills of the CIA and other interests that keep putting out false information. So the ETs are watching this, but what can change is in consciousness, this beautiful effect they called the Maharishi effect. If 1% of people are in a higher state of consciousness, a meditative state, it can alter the other 99% in a positive way. So we've had a goal of having 1% of the population, which would be about 80 million people globally, doing that and making peaceful contact. And that would change the whole energy of it to where this lucid dream I had of the future back in, it must have been in the early to mid 1970s, could happen. And I'm still cautiously optimistic that can take place. So that's what we're working towards. And I think we can do it if we all came together in a positive level of consciousness and work together in a collective.
Dr. Greer, it's interesting you bring that up, and I do know you have to go soon. I have to go myself. It is interesting you brought that up because that is the reason why the BART team got together. It started off as an art project, and then we started doing these spaces. And what we are aiming to do with these spaces is not so much rock the boat, but bring awareness. And as I've said before, it is all about awareness, because the people we are up against are the most ruthless people that you will ever fathom coming across. Absolutely brutal. And so to ask someone to take them on one-on-one or 10 on 100, whatever the case is virtually impossible. The only way you can do this is by informing the populace, making them more aware. And then this way, the people who you work with will feel more brave to come out into the public. So if you guys in the audience support what we do and you want to see more wonderful guests like Dr. Greer, take a look at the main Bartcoin account, the host account, give it a follow, check out our Telegram. We do have an NFT collection coming out in January, which will be a buy and burn. We're expecting about 20% of the supply to be burned. Next month, we'll be starting a huge TikTok and YouTube marketing campaign. And simultaneously, we do have partnerships with a company called Degenerate Casino, which will be raising funds to put a lot more power behind this project and bring more guests like Dr. Greer, who you did a fantastic job today. I just want to say I really enjoy your work, and I do appreciate what you have done throughout your career. I think it's very impressive. It's very bold. And if you had an ending statement for us, what would you think it would be?
I think the ending statement is that people, if they can, to help us with what we're doing with the Disclosure Project effort, and you can follow us on social media, which I guess is on here somewhere, but also with the Disclosure Project, Intelligence Archive, stay tuned for that. And also do the CE5 contact. I mean, just try it, gather with some people. One of the problems with this whole field is that there's too many people talking about things that they've never seen. And so seeing is believing. One thing, I have been now for 50 years doing contact. For 33 years, I've made teams all over the world. We have millions of people doing this. No one has ever been harmed. No one's had anything scary happen. No one's had an encounter with a negative ET. And I would take those hundreds of thousands of hours of people's experience and direct contact experiences over the rumors of rumors of rumors of rumors of rumors of rumors of rumors that get put out there for their psychological warfare value. So I would tell people the foundation of science and actually human evolution is direct experience. So put down your smartphones and computers and go out and meditate and invite and see what happens. If you do it with a pure heart and an open mind, you might be quite shocked at what happens.
Dr. Greer, is there a technique?
Dr. Greer, can I just
go ahead.
Can I just throw in 2 cents here? Because I don't know if you remember, Dr. Greer, but during the COVID lockdown, very kindly granted us an interview here at Camelot Castle, and the Duke of Marlborough was tuned in, and thousands of people were listening from all over England of what you had to say, and you described at that time the concept of getting into telepathic communication with ETs and extraterrestrial beings. And I didn't know this, but at the time, my 5-year-old son was listening to the broadcast upstairs in his bedroom. And I go upstairs and he said to me, "Daddy, that was very interesting. I've just been in communication with some extraterrestrial beings telepathically."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, Caspian, that's very interesting." Now, I didn't know this, but at the very same time, his parents, his grandparents, who are Russian, they were staying over here from Kazakhstan, and they were walking outside Camelot Castle, and they actually filmed 2 craft moving around outside above Camelot Castle at the exact moment that Caspian had been, unbeknownst to us, engaging in some type of an attempt as a 5-year-old to get in touch with these extraterrestrial beings. And funnily enough, they videoed these craft above Camelot, and it's very, very clear that they're not satellites at all.
Right.
It's not a particularly clear video, but it is. I don't know whether this is a coincidence or whether my son, in fact, did manifest these craft. But there's no question that if it is a coincidence, it's the most bizarre coincidence I've ever
we hear
into.
this all the time, and it's because I tell you, John, a pure-hearted child or a pure-hearted adult is much more likely to have contact with these civilizations than the president or the Secretary General of the United Nations or astrophysicists at Harvard, because if they're if they're pure-hearted and pure of spirit and clear of mind, that's what these civilizations are looking for. And this is why that's why I tell people we really need to have the ordinary people doing this, and that's where it shows to the civilizations that humans are really at the point of readiness to emerge into an interplanetary peaceful civilization. But
we got to show us.
We have to show them. See, we have to show them.
We got to show them our good side. We've got to show them that we basically are decent beings. And I think the greatest contribution, if you don't mind me saying, that you've made is as you said, if these guys wanted to destroy us, they have technologies that could destroy us in half a second. They could vaporize. They could knock the air cover off this planet. They could vaporize this planet in 30 seconds. If the powerful ETs out there with this technology, they have technologies that are off the scale.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that we're still here is a testimony to the fact that they want us still here.
Well, they're very patient.
So,
Yeah, they're very patient. Very patient.
incredibly patient, incredibly patient. And as any sentient life form is genuinely patient and is genuinely merciful. And so I think this philosophic aspect, and I think one of the things I would urge you to do, Dr. Greer, is to codify a book of your personal philosophy. Because I think you've made observations that are so valuable that they should be codified. And I know your immediate project of getting the disclosure data out to people is and the archive is going to be priceless. But I also think that your personal philosophy is really priceless. And I thank you so much for allowing our family to put you together with the BART community. And there is a community building. I don't fully understand crypto myself, but I've definitely bought a few BART coins, and I'm thoroughly enjoying watching them going up and down like horse draws. And let's see what happens. I support this project because it's going to be a big community of truth seekers, and if Camelot Castle and if a few of our friends can help in the export of truth, then we're all for that.
Very good. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for hosting me. I've got to run, and I wish you all the best of luck with what you're working on, and join us and stay tuned with what's going to be coming out in the new year, and have happy holidays and a great new year, you guys.
Thanks again, Dr. Greer. Same to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
If I may just take the floor quickly.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Reptile.
I don't want to disclose my location, but what I will say is it is nighttime where I am. And prior to jumping on the space, I had actually called my friend, terrified, screaming, saying, we live in the same building, saying, bro, I'm coming up to your room right now because I'm shitting myself. What happened was I was laying just on my couch and I was looking outside at the moon, and the moon, I'm not sure if this is a typical thing or if I was just going like crazy. I just never noticed it before. Typically a crescent, it's that typical like semicircle shape that right? Like the emoji. It's on the right side or the left side type of thing. But this crescent was on the bottom, right? So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me take a photo of that.
Now,
and so
what do you do?
I took a photo, and then I said to my friend, hey.
No.
Hung out with the
Sorry about that. Go ahead, John. Can you mute your mic?
Exactly what I needed, but it was like being in the sixth form centre at school on like the last day of term. It was just they were sat around. There's beer cans everywhere. They're smoking inside.
I think some sort of.
All right, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Deja Brew.
Right. So the moon, it was a crescent, but from the bottom of the moon upward. So I never seen that before. I took a photo, I sent to my friend like, hey, have you ever noticed this? And as I'm texting him, I go to take another photo because it was sort of low quality. And the moon, I kid you not, guys, I'm not one to lie. It disappeared in front of my very eyes. I didn't see it 1 second and gone. It's not a matter of, cloud cover or anything. It literally vanished. And I got goosebumps across my whole body. And then I'm thinking, what? Bro, I just watched the moon vanish. And as I turn, I look down the hallway into my bedroom. I swear on everything, guys. I saw a gray alien and I bolted out of my crib. I left immediately. Immediately, I was freaked out. That was hours before I just jumped in here, right? So that was kind of weird. And just now, as Stephen Greer was just giving us his final remarks, I come outside and I'm looking up at the night sky and I can see a few bright stars. One of them is Venus. I'm not sure what the others are. And the iPhone 15, its camera is actually amazing. You can zoom in quite well, and you can see the plasma dilate. You can literally see it like in flux, and you can see it glow. So I was like, wow, beautiful. I was zooming in, looking at Venus while Dr. Greer was speaking. And then I thought, he's talking about meditating and manifesting, alien presence, which I have done before in February 2022. But I thought, imagine if I could do that again. Yeah. So I kind of just concentrated very briefly. And immediately, I promise you, this is not a lie. Immediately, I saw what looked like, I don't even know how to describe it. It looked like a meteor shoot across the sky. And I was like, wow, what's a plane doing at this time of the night? And it's not a plane. I saw something flash across the night sky. So it's literally that simple, guys. You can go out, you close your eyes, you focus your awareness on the third eye point, which is, a bit between your eyebrows and an inch upward. You focus in that, people can hear you, things can hear you. In my opinion, telepathy becomes amplified when you're doing that. And I literally just now saw a UFO dart across the sky in the most spectacular glowing orange. It looked like a comet. But that literally just happened. I wanted to add that there.
Just so you guys know, Ruby doesn't BS, so I believe everything he's saying. But Ruby, did you know that, I was watching Greer's special yesterday, and the whole point of CE5 is that when you meditate, when you get to a certain point, they can hear you. And that, people have to really, consciousness is not bound by time or space. It can go galaxies and galaxies away from where we are. And also, it's an interconnected quantum web. So if you know what you're doing, you could tap into that web, and like you just said, Ruby, you could make contact with certain things that will draw towards you. So it really is fascinating what you said. I know you've been meditating a lot lately, so maybe that has something to do with it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps.
Yep. Reptile, what's up, my friend?
How you doing, guys? Wow, another great space from ReptilianZuckerBidenBartcoin. Getting all the big names on. But I've got to say this as well. Like, I respect Dr. Greer, I do, but I'm going to give my 2 cents worth. We live, ladies and gentlemen, in a dark sector of this galaxy. It's what this whole thing's about, okay? There are nefarious negative entities around, and I'm telling you right now, I can assure you that countless people have had extremely negative experiences with these beings. People in the government who have whistleblown. Countless people have been murdered all across the world for decades now. I'm thinking about Phil Schneider's story, other people, all these children that go missing. Do you not think that there are other entities involved in this? I assure you that there are. Even the wars, all the conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are playing an intergalactic chessboard game, and we're the
Question,
pawns.
Reptile. Do you
Yeah,
think
mate.
do you think they're intergalactic or interdimensional?
Probably interdimensional. I wouldn't be surprised if there's also some that are just as real physically as you and I that could have been living inside the planet or around this place for a lot longer than we have. So I think it's everything. But I just got to say this as well. We have to be so careful, and we should be skeptical, especially when doing, quote, CE5, where we are all going to connect in, ladies and gentlemen, to the positive aliens. If we just meditate and focus on them, we will all be given enlightenment. Because I promise you, behind that Nordic facade, you, my friends, will find the scaly reptilians with those vertical pupils.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man.
We gotta have
relax, man.
reptilian
Relax.
hybrid up here more often, man.
You guys are great. I think someone wanted to come up and ask a question, but I don't see him. Scrog, you see anyone raising their hand?
No. I think that was one of the most interesting spaces that BartCoin has had yet. I just want to reiterate that this is all possible and made possible by ReptilianZuckerBidenBartcoin. If you go and you look at the pinned tweet above the speakers, you will see a link to the website as well as the Telegram. Make sure you guys come join the Telegram. There's a lot of very like-minded people, and it's a blast. It's a huge community. You guys will have a ton of fun. Make
Yeah,
sure
and we're
you
just getting started here, guys. Just so you
and
know, we're
make sure
just
you
getting
look at the
started.
website as well. The website has a lot of rabbit holes. I personally have spent well over 2 hours going through all the rabbit holes. If you click around, you will find all sorts of Easter eggs on bartcoin.vip. It is extremely interesting, to say the least.
Yes, and don't forget our NFT collection is coming out the first week of January, I believe. It's going to be 10,000. It's going to be a buy and burn. It's a really, really cool collection. We did our preview at Art Basel. So yeah, I mean, we're just getting started here. We got a lot of good things coming up over the coming month and a half. So keep your eyes on this and go to our Telegram and follow the main Bartcoin Reptilian account that you see in the upper left, the host.
Let me go ahead and
Going on, I am telling you.
let me pin the sneak peek of the NFTs. I'm going to right now here. Give me a moment. There we go. If you guys look up in the Jumbotron, you will see a sneak peek of the NFT art. It was revealed at Art Basel in Miami. If you go and you look on the account as well, you'll see a big mural.
Yeah, I don't see it yet on top.
Yep, it's coming. It's up there. But yeah, BartCoin hosted a large, massive event in Miami at Art Basel and did a sneak peek for the art of the NFTs, and as well as put up a huge mural right in the middle of downtown Miami. So it's been very cool.
Yep. And yeah, so like I said, guys, we got a lot of stuff happening over the next month. So the best thing you could do is follow the host account. That is where you will get the most information. Also, come into the Telegram. You could find the buying instructions on the main host account. Do your own research, not financial advice, as you know. But yeah, everything looks really interesting going forward. We plan on bringing many more guest on the caliber of Mr. Greer, many, many more. And David, who unfortunately had a passing in his family, will be back over, I believe, January, right, Scrugg?
Yep. After New Year's, David Icke did have a passing of his daughter. But BartCoin has signed a year-long collaboration with David Icke, in which we will be doing spaces with him every other Sunday, and that will resume again in the New Year's. Yes, correct.
All right,
Paul,
Scrugg, I do have to run, so are we closing out?
let's hear from Paul real quick. Paul's
All right, do your thing, guys. I'll hang out for 5 minutes.
A big BART holder and a great supporter of BART. How's it going, Paul?
Hey guys, yeah, and once again, like an absolutely stellar space that the team has put on this weekend. So yeah, I just wanted to comment just quickly because there were probably people who are kind of new to crypto and they're new to this community, but just bear in mind with everything that's happening with X becoming the platform that it was never looking like ever being a couple of years back. There's a lot of serendipitous stuff, and the timing for BART is perfect because we all need to start looking at alternative ways of connecting with people. You know, putting aside the crypto point, but it's so vital in a world of CBDC and in a world of tyranny. We are needing to grab hold of any life raft of humanity that we have. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out, and the Telegram's a blast. All of the people on that are hilarious. So yeah, I just wanted to give a community flavor to it, and everyone's a force multiplier. You know, everyone has the obligation to reach out to humanity, and that's the only way we're going to take down the reptilian elite. And I, as a BART holder, look forward to our party in Davos, which is the other level ending for us. That'll be the next level or the final level boss. So yeah, let's ride to the sound of the guns, everybody.
You know, it's interesting you said that, and this is my closing statement because I got some things to do in the next hour. But I think it all comes down to awareness. You're not going to beat people with force. You're not going to beat people with ignorance. You have to be aware. And non-compliance to all the bullshit you're going to see in 2024. And mark my words, you are going to see a lot of bullshit in 2024, pardon my French. And if you are a sucker, you're going to fall for it, and you're going to be driven by your emotions, and you're going to be driven to the direction they want you to go in. Keep your head above, keep your spirit above your head, so to say, and be aware and observe from above, and don't be pushed around like a rag doll, because next year is going to be quite interesting, to say the least. With that being said, I got to go. Thanks everyone for being here. Scrog, the floor is yours, my friend, and I will see all you guys later.
See you, Michael. Thanks for being here, man.
And with that, I'm out too. Thank you, guys.
See you, Deja Vu. Thanks for being here, bro. Yep, we'll close it out here, guys. Thank you for everyone that joined. Again, we're going to be hosting these spaces regularly. They're every week. We have all sorts of big guests, so make sure you give a follow to ReptilianZuckerBidenBartcoin account, and you will get all the updates there. I personally, again, none of this is financial advice, but I have been buying BART because I support these spaces. I support raising awareness and consciousness around these issues, and that's kind of the entire, intention of the project, is to, bring these big guests on and to raise awareness and to bring attention to some of these issues that may have previously been in the dark. BART brings them to light. Jammy, how's it going?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, man.
Thanks for having me up. Great space. I was wondering if you guys can get Daryl, that guy that channels the Bashar entity. I don't know if you guys have heard of him before, but he's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. The team is extremely well connected and is able to get very large guests. So if you guys have any recommendations, and this goes for anyone in the audience, if there's anyone that you would like to see BartCoin bring up as a guest speaker, just DM the official account with your ideas and your recommendations. DM the official account, join a Telegram, buy a bag of BART, and come hang out with us. It's a really great, fun community, and it's just been an absolute blast. But yes, Jamie, we could more than likely make that happen. Just DM the official BART account.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to end it here. Thank you for everyone that joined, and I will see you all in the Telegram. Bye, guys.